A young boy named Owen found himself cornered by two other students who mocked him relentlessly. They taunted him, reminding him that his family, House Pepper, was on the brink of collapse and questioned his parents' supposed lack of magical talent, suggesting he was a failure of an aristocrat. Owen, however, defiantly declared his intention to become a top-grade magician, conjuring a large, vibrant fireball in his hand. The two bullies recoiled in shock and fear, while a blonde girl observed the display with a subtle, knowing smile. The narrative then shifted to 2 years prior, revealing an 8-year-old Owen Pepper, significantly overweight, standing within a grand residence. He loudly demanded food, specifically cake, from a maid, despite her protest that it was not yet time for his meal. He, still demanding, threatened the maid with dismissal if she did not hurry up with his cake, leaving her visibly distressed. He tumbled headfirst through the doorway, landing with a thud that startled the two maids attending him. One cried out in alarm, rushing to his side. As he lay dazed on the floor, the maids hovered over him, expressing deep concern that he might have injured his head. He slowly began to regain his senses. A profound realization dawned upon him. He had been reincarnated into this awful brat. He recalled his previous life as a salaryman named Yuta Sasaki and acknowledged the outrageously insolent behavior he had exhibited until this moment. Overwhelmed by shame, he attempted to perform a sincere dejiza, a deep bow of apology, to the bewildered maids. His considerable belly and backside, however, made the gesture awkward and difficult, leaving him wishing for a hole to hide in. He then shifted his attention to his new parents, observing them at a lavish dinner table laden with an absurd amount of food. He noted their casual assertion that the people of a noble's territory exist solely to be extorted so that the aristocracy may be fed. His parents, identified as Regent Pepper's feudal Lord Black Pepper and his wife Aisha Pepper, continued to feast, confirming that it was indeed the people's duty to provide for them. He realized he had been reborn as the son of a truly vicious feudal lord. He understood that such elitist parents, who looked down on commoners and bled them dry, were naturally hated by the populace, who openly called them swine of a lord. He also recognized that he, having been raised by them, had been taught to be equally useless and disdainful. He gazed at the enormous roasted bird on his plate, lamenting that he himself had turned into a pig due to his trashy parents. He internally offered a sincere apology to all the people of the territory. His parents noticed his lack of appetite and questioned him. He initially moved to fire the head chef, but quickly reconsidered, explaining that the problem was not the chef, but the high-calorie, greasy food with few vegetables that had upset his stomach. He internally admitted his own hypocrisy, realizing he was about to fire someone over something so trivial, just like his parents. The head chef, surprised, readily agreed to Owen's request to reduce his portions and make them healthier. Owen, though having managed to protect the chef for now, resolved to be more mindful of his remarks from that moment forward. He pushed himself to run, his heavy body struggling with every step, the exertion leaving him breathless. Exhausted, he collapsed onto the ground, utterly spent. A butler approached, offering a towel to the young master. He gratefully accepted the towel, realizing the immense weight of his body and his complete lack of stamina for even simple exercise. He thanked Seabass-san. Still struggling with his physical limitations, he asked Seabass if he knew of any effective diet methods. Seabass, in turn, suggested practicing magic. The idea stunned Owen. He knew magic existed, of course, but had never considered it for himself. The world's chronicler explained that magic power was a prerequisite for nobility, though even average nobles possessed it. Owen's own parents could barely use it, leading to them being looked down upon by other aristocrats. Only aristocrats and a small portion of commoners in this world could wield magic. Seabass admitted he could not use magic himself, but offered to call upon a specialist to teach Owen. Owen, realizing the potential for magic to consume energy, eagerly agreed, asking how he could begin. Several days later, Owen stood outside, his magic lessons set to begin that very day. He had been so excited that he hadn't slept a wink. A new figure approached him. The woman introduced herself as Katerina, expressing her anticipation for their lessons together. Owen, taken aback by her striking beauty, could only stammer in response. He quickly composed himself, bowing slightly as he introduced himself. "I am Owen Pepper." Katerina's eyes widened slightly, a hint of surprise crossing her features as she processed his introduction. She observed Owen, a slight smile playing on her lips, and remarked that he appeared quite different from what she had been led to imagine. Owen, taken aback, simply uttered a sound of surprise. He eagerly asked if they should begin their lesson. Katerina, however, paused, internally acknowledging the negative description she had received of him as a violent and selfish child, but decided against revealing it. She then asked what he wished to know, to which Owen, with a knowing look, suggested it was nothing important. Owen, with unbridled enthusiasm, declared that as the one who would teach him magic, she was, of course, his teacher. His directness seemed to catch Katerina slightly off guard. With Owen's affirmation, she agreed to briefly explain the nature of magic, and they began to move towards the Grand Mansion. Katerina began the lesson by instructing Owen to perceive magic power, explaining that its employment required imagination and was often easier to activate with chanting. Owen, standing with his hands clenched, attempted to imagine fire, understanding that one must comprehend a phenomenon to produce it. As he struggled, Owen inquired about the sensation of magic power, admitting he had yet to feel anything. Katerina pondered how best to describe it. She then demonstrated, explaining that for her, magic felt like a warm entity, a warmth centered around her body. This, she affirmed, was her magic power. Owen, however, confessed that he still didn't understand. Katerina quickly reassured him, explaining that it typically took about a week to get a feel for one's magic power, urging him not to worry too much. Despite her words, Owen, drawing upon the memories of his previous life, began to search within his body for any new sensation. To his astonishment, he quickly found a distinct warmth, realizing with a jolt that this must be his magic power. Katerina watched, utterly shocked by his incredibly rapid discovery. Owen excitedly announced that he had made his magic move. Katerina, still reeling from his swift progress, could only ask him to try moving it around again, wondering aloud what would come next. He was sweating profusely, his body working hard to perceive and move his magic. He wondered aloud if this exertion could help him lose weight, and if he had truly managed to use magic. Katerina, observing his rapid progress, acknowledged that while she had expected it to take him around 10 days to reach this point, he was indeed a genius at magic. Overjoyed by the unexpected praise, he beamed with delight, expressing his gratitude to his teacher. As he celebrated, Katerina muttered to herself, realizing that the rumors about Owen must have been mistaken. He noticed her quiet contemplation and asked if she was all right. Regaining her composure, she began to explain the next steps for magic. She instructed him to first conceptualize the desired phenomenon and then chant, typically from the hand. She advised him to watch carefully as she demonstrated, and he affirmed his understanding. Following her own instructions, Katerina demonstrated, chanting, "Come forth." Fireball. A large, swirling orb of fire materialized above her hand, astonishing Owen, who exclaimed in wonder at the sight of true magic. After her impressive display, she instructed Owen to try it himself. He responded with a determined yes, and prepared to attempt his first spell. He began to focus his power into his right hand, but the effort was already draining him. His hand glowed faintly as he concentrated. Despite his visible exhaustion, he insisted he was fine. Katerina, seeing his struggle, advised him not to overdo it, reminding him that it was his first time. Ignoring his teacher's concern, he pushed himself further, imagining the effect of the spell. He was resolute in his desire to use magic. With a final, determined roar, he unleashed his power, shouting, "Come forth." Fireball. To Katerina's utter astonishment, he conjured a ridiculously huge fireball, far exceeding the size of her own demonstration. He had just conjured a massive fireball, leaving his teacher, Katerina, utterly dumbfounded. She stared in disbelief, exclaiming that it was impossible. He, too, was surprised, muttering about the magic he had managed to use. Her voice, filled with a mix of shock and concern, called out his name. He awoke in his bed, disoriented, and immediately asked for Katerina. Seabass, the butler, stood by his bedside, confirming his awakening and inquiring if he had fallen unconscious. Meanwhile, in the parlor, Lord Pepper confronted Katerina, accusing her of injuring his son despite the fortune he paid for proper lessons. Seabass offered his deepest apologies. Overhearing the commotion, he realized his injury was the cause of the argument. She retorted, demanding that Lord Pepper cease insulting her parents, stating that his apology would not resolve the situation. He scoffed, claiming her parents' lowliness was evident. As the argument escalated, Lord Pepper grabbed Katerina, threatening to personally educate her. Just then, he burst into the room, declaring that he could not overlook such an act. He clenched his fist, his expression resolute. Lord Pepper, surprised by his son's sudden appearance, asked what he wanted. Katerina, observing his determined stance, realized she might not be able to stop him through normal means. He declared with a mischievous grin that he would teach her lessons, suggesting they step into the same ring. His father, Lord Pepper, instructed him not to be lenient with her. He simply replied that he understood, a sly smile spreading across his face. He then entered a room where Katerina stood, looking apprehensive. She nervously asked what he planned to do to her, to which he calmly replied, "Nothing in particular." She stood before him, still processing his challenge, as Owen, with a slight smile, asked if she was all right, apologizing for his father's earlier behavior. Her eyes widened, reflecting a profound shock and perhaps a dawning realization. Still reeling, she questioned if he had truly rescued her. He humbly dismissed it, claiming it was nothing grand. Suddenly, she embraced him tightly, declaring with conviction that she had made a decision. With tears welling in her eyes, she vowed to protect him, ensuring he could live as a child should, lamenting how he had been forced to mature beyond his years in such a shameful environment. Owen, caught off guard by her embrace and declaration, felt a blush creep onto his face. He realized she had completely misunderstood his intentions, yet he couldn't help but acknowledge her kind nature and the unexpected softness of her form. 2 years later, Owen had grown considerably, both in stature and magical prowess. He continued his magic practice day in and day out, now able to give tangible form to his imagination, conjuring a powerful fireball with ease. He reveled in the joy of his progress, finding nothing as exhilarating as this. Katerina watched nearby, still present in his life. Thanks to his diligent training, Owen had lost most of his excess weight, though he still felt he had a bit of a beer belly left. As he discussed his progress with Katerina, Seabass, the butler, approached, informing the young master that a letter had arrived for him. The letter, Seabass explained, was an invitation to the upcoming 10th birthday celebration of the daughter of Ducal House Adelheid. Owen pondered whether his parents would attend, considering he was also still a young child. Seabass confirmed that it would certainly be the case, and it would be ill-advised to decline such an invitation. Owen decided he should ask his parents just in case. His parents, Lord and Lady Pepper, reacted with outrage to the invitation. His father, Lord Pepper, loudly declared the idea of attending such an event stupid, while his mother, Lady Pepper, echoed his sentiment, stating they would never go. He observed their outburst, realizing they likely couldn't be bothered to attend, and expected him, a child, to go alone. He mused that he didn't care much either way. His thoughts drifted to the social dynamics of their world, where aristocratic supremacy revolved around magical ability. He knew his parents could barely use magic, a fact that likely fueled their reluctance to engage in high society. Still, he understood that if a count family like theirs rejected a ducal house's invitation, it would cause offense. His parents clearly had a complex about joining noble gatherings, and he admitted the same applied to him. He sighed, acknowledging his own social awkwardness. Since he was a loner and bad with such things, he concluded there was no choice but for him to go by himself. He recalled his past self, who had been an arrogant inferior, before regaining his previous life's memories, messing up in all sorts of ways, and thus being invited to fewer and fewer social occasions. 1 week later, he stood before a mirror, feeling a renewed sense of determination. He had gotten thinner, and he believed things would work out better now. He could do this. Arriving at the grand ducal house Adelheid, he felt a pang of nervousness. He hoped he wouldn't be out of place, relying on the etiquette lessons Butler Seabass had drilled into him. He resolved to be careful not to stand out negatively, wanting to avoid overturning his reputation so quickly. A distinguished noble nearby pointed out that this was House Adelheid's celebration. As the crowd murmured, a young girl with long white hair, Natalie Adelheid, the daughter of the house, began her descent down the magnificent staircase, her presence commanding attention. He watched her, utterly captivated. "Yo, what a cute girl," he thought. "She looks like an angel." He found himself observing Natalie Adelheid, the daughter of the ducal house. He considered himself an unsocial, infamous person, a stark contrast to her, a brightly shining young girl. As she offered a radiant smile, he couldn't help but acknowledge the vast difference between their worlds. Seeking a moment of quiet, he stepped out onto a grand balcony overlooking a lush garden. The solitude brought him a sense of calm. From his vantage point, he noticed Natalie again, now conversing with other nobles. Despite her seemingly blessed existence, he perceived a subtle shadow lingering across her otherwise cheerful demeanor. His moment of peace was abruptly interrupted as she approached him on the balcony. He was startled, having believed himself to be alone, and recognized her with a gasp. "Natalie to smile." Moments later, the young man, now identified as Owen, found himself on an upper balcony, looking down as a young girl with long blonde hair introduced herself as Natalie Adelheid, a young lady of the ducal family, expressing her surprise at finding someone else present. He then introduced himself as Owen Pepper, acknowledging her as the lead actor of the day, a statement that seemed to surprise her. Natalie, recovering from her surprise, questioned him about his family's infamous reputation, asking if he was truly as irritable and prone to anger as rumors suggested. Owen, with a laugh, readily admitted that the rumors were precisely true, realizing their family's behavior had even reached the ears of a ducal young lady. As he spoke, Natalie sharply reminded him that he was also a child, scolding him for speaking as if he were an adult. He explained his self-introspective nature, attributing his mature demeanor to being at an age where he wished to act grown up. Natalie, observing him from below, found him to be quite a strange individual, especially when compared to the rumors she had heard. Owen, misinterpreting her observation, thanked her, but she quickly clarified that she had not been praising him. She then casually remarked that he made for a good way to kill time, even though it was his birthday, a statement he seemed to accept with a sigh. Natalie, now the sole focus, explained that what they called a birthday party was merely a societal event to unveil her to the public, more akin to an exhibition where she was constantly forced to display appropriate conduct for a young lady of a ducal house. She concluded with a somber reflection, stating that this was her duty simply for being born into a ducal family, and as the centerpiece of the day, she could not avoid having to entertain the guests. She remained lost in thought, a somber expression on her face, concluding that there was truly nothing to be done about her circumstances. He watched her, a silent observer of her quiet resignation. Owen then spoke, reflecting on how birthdays were once joyful occasions in his previous world, a precious time for children. He wondered if it was different for aristocratic children in this world, to which Natalie simply replied, "No." He continued, recalling a teacher's words about the preciousness of childhood and how it would be a waste to spend such valuable time feeling bored. With a bright smile, he extended his hand towards her, inviting her to come and play. She looked up, her eyes wide with surprise at his unexpected gesture. He leaned closer, his smile unwavering, reminding her that today was her special day, and as the main character, she shouldn't wear such a tedious expression on her birthday. Natalie, however, saw it differently. She mused that a special day for her meant having to entertain everyone else all day, which was hardly fun. Owen countered, asserting that what truly mattered was what she wanted to do. Without further hesitation, he firmly grasped her hand, startling her. Still holding her hand, he declared that they were already friends and urged her to come with him. Natalie stared, utterly stunned, the word friends echoing in her mind as her eyes widened in disbelief. Still holding Owen's hand, Natalie expressed her concern that they would be discovered if they went through the main hall. Owen, however, reassured her, suggesting they explore the garden instead. She questioned where they would even go, but he dismissed her worries. He, with a confident smile, declared that his 2 years of training had yielded significant results. Demonstrating a glowing orb in his hand, he called out, "Earth." Then, extending his hand to Natalie, he urged her to follow him down a nearby staircase, ready to lead the way. As they descended the staircase, a male voice suddenly called out, "Natalie," and then, "Father." The voice, presumably Natalie's father, demanded to know what she was doing and ordered her to return immediately. With a sudden change of plans, Owen swiftly grabbed Natalie, shouted, "Release gravity," and together they leaped from the balcony. Natalie let out a surprised cry as she began to fall, surrounded by a shimmering aura that indicated the effect of Owen's magic. Owen held her close as they continued their descent, a determined look on his face, while Natalie appeared wide-eyed and startled by the unexpected sensation. She, still held by Owen, exclaimed in disbelief that they were flying. Her mind raced, wondering if this impossible feat was truly flight magic. From the balcony, the man Natalie had called father and another adult male watched in utter shock as Owen and Natalie floated away. The father figure exclaimed, "Flight magic," and then, in disbelief, declared, "Impossible." Owen, in a moment of reflection, explained that this was his specialty magic, a unique ability he had developed by combining his knowledge from a previous life with the intelligence of Katarina-sensei. He noted that in this world, the prevalent understanding that all things are bound to the ground served as a significant hurdle for people to correctly grasp the intended phenomenon of magic. His knowledge from a previous life, specifically the understanding that all things are attracted to the ground by gravity, allowed him to properly comprehend and operate this magic, effectively breaking the chains of conventional thought. The narration concluded by stating that flight magic was considered a very special ability, and in the past, it could only be used by certain individuals known as witches. He continued to hold Natalie close as they soared through the sky, a feat of flight magic that, according to Katarina-sensei, made him the only person currently capable of such a thing. Still aloft, Natalie exclaimed with delight, marveling at how small her house appeared from above and how amazing it felt to fly through the sky. Owen, though visibly strained, offered a tired smile, telling her to consider it his birthday present. She thanked him. His efforts were clearly taking their toll, as he admitted that carrying two people was becoming quite heavy and he couldn't sustain the flight much longer. Natalie, taken aback, demanded to know what he had just said. She turned to him, her face contorted in indignation, vehemently denying that she was heavy and insisting he correct himself. He could only offer a quick apology. He simply looked away, a faint smile still playing on his lips, offering a soft, non-committal sound. Moments later, the flight ended abruptly, and they landed on the ground. Owen immediately collapsed onto his hands and knees, utterly exhausted, while Natalie let out a surprised cry, realizing he had truly reached his limit. As they recovered from the landing, Natalie teased him, remarking on his surprising abilities and questioning if his bad reputation was merely a facade. He, flustered, tried to explain it away as youthful indiscretion, claiming he was just at an age where he wanted to act grown up. She chuckled, having heard that excuse before. Suddenly, Natalie noticed the faint music from the grand hall reaching them even at their distance, and she wondered if they should return soon. Owen, however, seemed more concerned with her enjoyment, asking if she had a good time, even if it meant being treated as a kidnapper. She seemed hesitant, admitting she hadn't really. Instead, she abruptly changed the subject, asking Owen if he could dance. He looked surprised, asking why. She explained that she didn't mind, but it was time to dance right now. She then revealed that as the main actor, she was supposed to open the dances in the center of the hall tonight, and told Sir Abductor to take responsibility. He looked utterly flustered by her demand, admitting that he wasn't particularly good at dancing and his hands were still wet with sweat. He conceded that it was his fault. She extended her hand, asking if he would grant her this dance. He considered it, then agreed, but only if she was still fine with the arrangement. Under the soft glow of the full moon, surrounded by the rustling leaves of the garden, they began to move, musical notes seemingly drifting through the night air around them. As they continued their dance before the grand mansion, he admitted to himself that he was awkward, yet they both put forth their best effort. This, he realized, was the true beginning, Natalie's and his first genuine encounter. The tale of a young man, reincarnated as the son of a vicious lord, finds joy in learning magic. He is often seen alongside a bright-eyed blonde girl and a serene, silver-haired companion. The third chapter of his journey begins, with the young lord, Owen Pepper, seated amidst a pile of luggage, a confident smile gracing his face as he prepares for new adventures. Meanwhile, Natalie's father, Ralph Adelheid, stood before a grand estate, his expression stern as he questioned the circumstances that led to his daughter's supposed kidnapping. He pondered the unexpected news that his daughter had become friends with the eldest son of House Pepper, a development he was entirely unaware of. Owen, observing the man's intense demeanor, internally noted how truly frightening his anger could be, while Natalie simply recalled their recent friendship. Suddenly, Ralph's stern expression broke into a booming laugh, a wide smile replacing his frown as he exclaimed his understanding. Owen was merely a friend. With a final instruction for Owen to continue getting along well with Natalie, Ralph turned and departed, his earlier suspicions about a scoundrel taking off with his daughter now completely dispelled. As he left, Natalie turned to Owen, remarking that even he could get nervous, to which Owen, relieved, realized that Ralph had not been angry after all, but merely stressed. Owen felt a wave of relief, grateful that Ralph was a reasonable person and that he hadn't been killed. He knew Duke Adelheid was not only a pillar of the nation, designated by the king, but also excelled at magic, capable of crushing someone like him both physically and socially in an instant. Natalie then shifted the conversation, observing that they would likely be dealing with each other for a long time to come, and asked if Owen also planned to attend a magic school in the future. The mention of magic school caught Owen by surprise, a sudden realization dawning on him that he should have been accepted to one of those institutions. Natalie, meanwhile, casually stated that she would be attending Zansar herself. He listened as Natalie extended her hand, a warm smile gracing her face, expressing her hope that they would become friends and attend the same school in the future. He readily agreed, firmly shaking her hand, solidifying their new friendship. Later, upon his return home, the butler greeted him warmly, inquiring about his experience at the party. He proudly announced that he had made a new friend. The butler expressed his delight at the news. He then shifted the conversation, asking about the magic school he was set to attend in half a year, revealing that his new friend, Natalie, would be attending Zansar. To his astonishment, the butler confirmed that Zansar was indeed his designated school as well, reassuring him completely. A wave of excitement washed over him. He then inquired about Katerina Sensei, an alumna of Zansar, and the butler suggested he seek her out for more information about the school. Meanwhile, in a classroom, Katerina Sensei began her lecture, announcing that the day's topic would be magic academies. She explained the fundamentals, stating that most noble children begin attending magic school at age 10 as an obligation, using their strong magic powers to contribute to society. She clarified that commoners could also enroll, though tuition fees applied. He sat in the classroom, still half a year away from his own enrollment. He voiced his concern, having witnessed his parents adhere to discriminatory doctrines, wondering if aristocrats and commoners would clash when attending school together. Katerina acknowledged that such clashes could occur, but clarified that Zansar operated on a merit-based system. She reassured him that one's ability was paramount, regardless of birth. He absorbed this information, a sense of understanding dawning upon him. As Katerina continued her lecture, discussing other schools, he felt a surge of renewed motivation, wondering how far his own magic would ultimately carry him. He imagined himself making friends and earning recognition for his magical prowess, a goal he had already begun to achieve. Meanwhile, Katerina Sensei's voice echoed in his mind, asking if he was listening. Half a year later, the day of his departure arrived. He spent the intervening months filled with excitement, eagerly anticipating his enrollment. As he prepared to leave, he considered sending a letter to Natalie, knowing that Zansar promised a fulfilling environment. As he stood at the entrance, he realized only the butler and the woman with glasses had come to see him off, prompting him to make an ambivalent face. He quickly dismissed it, acknowledging that his past behavior likely contributed to the sparse farewell. He knew it was too late to change his past actions, but a profound regret settled over him. He wished he had treated everyone with more kindness. A vivid memory flashed through his mind, a younger, chubbier version of himself, acting unforgivably towards the maids. He concluded that they must surely despise him for his past rudeness. He could only hope they might forgive him, even a little, by the time he returned home. The butler and the woman with glasses watched him, their expressions unreadable. He glanced at the butler, who seemed to ponder his thoughts, perhaps sensing the internal turmoil he was experiencing. Suddenly, his eyes widened in surprise. The entire household staff, including the maids and chefs, had gathered outside, calling his name and wishing him a safe journey. The maids, with earnest expressions, urged him to study hard and become a splendid person, while also cautioning him to be careful on the road. The chefs, equally concerned, added their own advice, warning him not to pick up and eat things off the floor, and reminding him to continue eating in moderation while keeping his meals nutritious. He stood surprised as the butler, a figure of stern tradition, spoke with unexpected warmth. The butler acknowledged the profound change Owen had undergone in the past 2 years, adding that while he didn't know the impetus for this transformation, everyone in the household had come to love his current self. Owen looked flustered by the revelation, but then Katerina Sensei stepped forward, placing a hand on his shoulder and affirming that she could indeed warrant how much effort he had put in during that time. He internally grappled with the unexpected kindness, reflecting that even though his past actions were from before he regained his memories, they were still his responsibilities. He had believed he would be cast out of the house on a much colder note. Yet, here he was, receiving such a warm send-off from everyone, including the maids and chefs who stood nearby. With a genuine smile and a gesture of gratitude, he thanked them profusely, explaining that he would absolutely never forget how they continued to treat someone like him well, attended to him despite himself, and were now seeing him off in such a manner. The staff, including the chefs and maids, surrounded him, embracing him warmly and expressing their happiness for their young master. Katerina Sensei then stepped closer, telling him she was truly glad she had the opportunity to teach him magic, and that she had always wanted to protect him. He looked up at her, declaring her the best teacher he could ask for, and thanked her for imparting her magical knowledge. She embraced him tightly, reminding him not to forget that she would always be on his side, and affectionately called him her precious pupil. And with that, the carriage departed, carrying him on his journey to the royal capital. He finally arrived at the royal capital, his heart pounding with excitement for what awaited him. As he looked around, he noticed the horse carriages were forming a significant congestion, leading him to realize that many people must be heading to the Magic Academy. He muttered that it couldn't be helped, and they would have to wait their turn, though he inwardly questioned why they were being made to wait like this. Suddenly, a loud voice cut through the air as a young man with a prominent scar on his cheek aggressively demanded to pass, citing his court rank. Owen observed him, thinking he was an unreasonable complainer and deciding not to get involved. The young man was then firmly told that court ranks held no relevance here. Nearby, a young girl with light hair and a hooded cloak introduced herself as Farin Antonelli. Owen, witnessing her calm demeanor, thought her a courageous girl. She calmly stated that they were not nobles. The arrogant young man, taken aback, questioned her identity, asking what noble house she belonged to, as he had never heard of an Antonelli. She reiterated that, as she had told him, such ranks held no bearing here, and that in the school, actual ability was everything. The arrogant young man scoffed, accusing her of trying to defy someone from a marquis family, and declared he would show her his real power. Owen, witnessing the escalating tension, realized the situation was quickly turning dire. With a furious expression, he unleashed a flame bullet directly towards Farin, who looked on with wide, startled eyes. A dark-clad figure, the arrogant noble, unleashed a flame bullet towards a smaller, cloaked girl, Farin, who fled in terror. To his astonishment, the flame bullet was not only deflected but shattered into icy fragments, leaving the noble wide-eyed and exclaiming in disbelief. Moments later, Owen Pepper rushed to the cloaked girl's side, asking if she was unharmed. She confirmed her safety, offering a heartfelt thank you. The arrogant noble, still reeling from the unexpected deflection, confronted Owen and Farin, demanding to know Owen's identity. Owen, meanwhile, found himself captivated by Farin's delicate appearance. Owen then introduced himself as Owen Pepper of Count Pepper's house, a revelation that caused the noble to recall his existence with a start. The noble then issued a veiled threat, warning Owen not to play with fire, implying harm to his family. Owen's expression hardened at the insinuation. He vehemently denied any intention of harming a plebeian girl, questioning why he would bother. Owen, holding Farin protectively, retorted, asking what else his actions could be called if not playing around, his voice laced with challenge. As their argument intensified, the arrogant noble prepared to unleash a flame bullet and a fireball simultaneously. Owen, in turn, began to conjure his own magic, preparing to freeze over his opponent. Just as their spells were about to clash, a powerful surge of ice erupted between them, forming a massive barrier. A new figure, a tall woman, emerged, scolding them both for their disruptive clamor. The woman, revealed to be Dominic Sylphide, the next head of a duke family, stood with an air of authority. The arrogant noble, recognizing the distinctive badge on her uniform, gasped in realization, identifying her as a 3-stars mage, a title held by only a select few top magic users in the kingdom. Dominic, with an authoritative stance, questioned the presence of a 3-stars mage in such a place, even as Owen looked on in bewildered surprise. She then revealed her own identity, stating that she had become a teacher at Zansar. She sternly warned Owen and Natalie not to cause any more trouble before they had even officially enrolled. Understanding the gravity of her words, Owen and Natalie both offered their apologies, with Owen confirming his comprehension. After the tense encounter, they managed to enter the school wards without further incident. Meanwhile, the arrogant noble, clearly displeased, turned and departed. Owen, now standing alone outside the school, let out a sigh of relief, acknowledging that his school life was finally about to begin after the unexpected events of his arrival. He then found himself pondering Dominic's immense power, wondering if he, too, could one day become a 3-starred magician. Reminding himself of the immediate tasks at hand, he thought about living in a dorm and the need to unpack, but resolved to first focus on getting accustomed to the school environment. With a renewed sense of purpose, he raised a fist in determination, declaring his intent to do his absolute best. The scene shifted to the day of the school entrance ceremony. Owen, now dressed in a new, formal uniform, examined himself, wondering if the attire suited him. As he walked through a school hallway, he confirmed his class assignment, realizing he was in Class A. Just then, a voice from an unseen individual greeted him, remarking that it had been a while. He found himself face-to-face with Natalie Adelheid, who greeted him with a radiant smile. He noted that she seemed to have gotten a bit thinner, a change he found somewhat uncool despite his own efforts to appear composed. Other students whispered, curious about the nature of their relationship. Natalie then inquired if he had been doing well. He responded with a blunt no, a reply that seemed to surprise her, though he inwardly resolved not to be discouraged by her reaction. His surprise grew as Natalie confessed she had been incredibly bored without him, adding that she simply couldn't forget that night. Her words left him flustered, struggling to comprehend their implications. As the other students continued to speculate about their relationship, he worried about being misunderstood. Natalie, however, seemed unfazed, confirming that they were indeed in the same class, a fact she stated as if it were the most natural thing in the world. He then questioned how the school determined class assignments, if not by measuring abilities. Natalie explained that Zansar divided students into classes A through D based on their family's peerage, not individual talent. She clarified that this was how the majority of students were initially separated, as magic was strongly hereditary. However, she acknowledged that there were some exceptions to this rule. Natalie then expressed her hope that they would get along well in the same class for the coming 8 years, a duration that left him visibly surprised. He hesitantly agreed to try, while Natalie added that the real division by ability would not begin for another 2 years. Just then, a voice from the front of the room instructed all the students to take their seats, noting the considerable number of new faces. The teacher, a woman with a confident demeanor, introduced herself as Chris Clifford, a 3-stars magician. He immediately recognized her as the same teacher who had broken up his fight earlier, a fact that surprised him. He and Natalie exchanged glances, both realizing that having a 3-stars magician as a homeroom teacher for first-year students was truly exceptional. Chris Clifford then instructed the students to introduce themselves, stating that she did not care about the order. She had just instructed the students to introduce themselves, and a young man stepped forward. He declared himself Berg Ritten, the third prince, and politely requested that his classmates treat him without regard for his royal standing. The other students reacted with admiration, some calling him handsome and wonderful. Next, a girl with short, light hair introduced herself as Farin Antonelli. Owen recognized her, realizing she was the one from that time, while Natalie reacted with surprise, murmuring the name Saints. Owen and Natalie discussed Farin, realizing that her ability to use sacred magic was rare, explaining why a commoner like her was part of their prestigious class. Without delay, he decided to introduce himself next, stating his name as Owen Pepper. As he spoke, other students whispered, recalling rumors about the Pepper family being in decline and Owen himself being an inhuman failure. Chris Clifford observed silently, then prompted him to continue. He internally acknowledged that the rumors surrounding him had spread more widely than he had anticipated. Despite the whispers, he continued, admitting he was still inexperienced but expressed his hope to improve alongside everyone, aiming to become a first-class magician. He concluded his introduction with a bright smile, expressing his eagerness to work together with his classmates. Natalie watched him, a gentle smile gracing her lips. Meanwhile, some students commented that Owen seemed different from the rumors, appearing to be a normal person. Owen, however, looked down, clenching his fist, his expression hidden. He clenched his fist tighter, a look of intense frustration and determination etched onto his face, as if suppressing a powerful emotion. A cloaked figure, perched silently on a windowsill, observed the surroundings. A faint, knowing smile played on their lips as they declared, "Found one." The hooded figure's gaze sharpened, focusing on Owen Pepper, whose face was contorted with a mixture of envy and repugnance. The cloaked observer mused internally that Owen might prove to be a useful test subject for a certain medicine, reiterating their earlier thought, "Found one." As the hooded figure continued their clandestine observation, they decided to first test the mettle of their chosen subject. They considered that if things were arranged properly, Owen Pepper, now seen sitting in a classroom alongside female_silver_hair_1, could also prove useful for their experiments. Katerina-sensei, a new teacher, declared that adhering to the normal curriculum was not her way. She intended to teach them personally, skipping self-introductions and class for the day. She admitted her own novice status as a teacher but insisted on having the students demonstrate their power immediately, instructing them to assemble at the training field. Owen and another student reacted with surprise to her unconventional approach. The academy itself was more than just a school building. It encompassed extensive practice fields for magical training and a bustling business district filled with various establishments, creating an enriching environment for its students. As the students made their way, Natalie confirmed Owen's observation, explaining that the school was essentially an entire city district unto itself. At the elementary education practice field, a large group of students had gathered. Katerina-sensei announced that before they delved into their individual abilities, they would first review some fundamental magic concepts. She began by asking if anyone knew about the 4 primary elements of magic: fire, water, earth, and wind. After receiving an affirmative response, she pressed further, inquiring why these specific elements were designated as the 4 primary categories. Owen, quick to respond, explained that these elements were easier to imagine and thus to materialize, as magic itself swelled up in accordance with one's imagination. Suddenly, a powerful surge of ice magic erupted, accompanied by the command to freeze over. Katerina-sensei stood at the center of the icy blast, having just demonstrated the formidable power of ice magic to her assembled students. Owen then elaborated on his own particular aptitude for ice magic, revealing that his proficiency stemmed from growing up in a snowy country, which allowed him to understand the coldness of ice intimately. His explanation drew a look of annoyance from one of his classmates, while another observed him intently. He listened as Katerina-sensei, with a confident gesture, instructed the students to unleash their most powerful magic upon the designated wall. She reminded them that they had all been preparing their own spells until now. As the lesson began, a male student with glasses stepped forward, declaring, "Water, go," as he attempted to cast a spell. Katerina-sensei observed his weak attempt, noting his current skill level. Owen watched the demonstration. Following the initial demonstration, Bird Written launched himself forward with a body strength eating technique, while Natalie Adelheid, with a confident smile, unleashed a powerful lightning lance. Katerina-sensei was impressed by their displays, acknowledging their skill. Their impressive displays drew attention, and Katerina-sensei remarked that their magic was quite decent. The surrounding students murmured in awe, recognizing the prowess of the prince and the duke's daughter. Observing the reactions, Owen's thoughts turned to his own abilities. He grinned mischievously, wondering aloud if he could melt the ice with his flames if he were to follow the flow of the lesson. With a sudden burst of energy, he began to cast, calling out, "Fire bullet," as a swirling mass of dark flame formed before him. He seemed momentarily startled by the intensity of his own spell. Having unleashed his magic, he turned to the onlookers with a wide, almost manic grin, giving a confident gesture as if to say, "See." Immediately, Farron Antonelli rushed to his side, expressing concern that he had been burned and offering to heal him. Owen, however, seemed more preoccupied, wondering if the previous spell had been aimed at him on purpose. The male student with glasses watched the exchange. Without hesitation, she began the healing process, chanting for sacred light to heal him as a soft glow enveloped Owen's arm. The burn quickly faded, and Katerina-sensei, observing the miraculous recovery, acknowledged Farron's power as that of a true saintess. As the healing concluded, Farron spoke to him again, asking what time it was before abruptly thanking him for that other time. Owen, caught off guard, reacted with a surprised yell. He found himself cornered by Natalie and the silver-haired girl, who teased him about his romantic preferences. Natalie recounted how he had once saved her when Dominic picked a quarrel before school, then asked if that kind of girl was his type. He vehemently denied it, his face flushing. As he tried to deflect, the silver-haired girl joined in, pressing him further about his supposed type of girl, despite his outward confidence, declaring that his type was unequivocally blonde hair, blue eyes all the way. He internally struggled, unable to name the specific person he had in mind. His internal struggle was cut short when he suddenly realized he was late. With a quick exclamation, he dashed away, leaving the two girls behind. Elsewhere, a group of students, including Berg, the glasses student, and the arrogant noble, discussed Owen, noting that he was Pepper and rumored to barely be able to use magic. He, however, was acutely aware that everyone was now paying attention to him, a consequence of his previous fireball incident and his own dawdling. Determined to make an impression, he resolved to show them a bit of his power. He mused that his fire magic clashed too much with Dominic's, so he would have to demonstrate something else. Moments later, a gasp escaped Chris Clifford, the teacher, as Owen suddenly floated into the air. She exclaimed, realizing he was using flight and identifying it as gravity magic. Her surprise was echoed by the other students, with Chris marveling that she never knew someone besides witches could use such proper flight magic. Berg and the glasses student were amazed, questioning if it was truly just wind magic, while the arrogant noble dismissed it as merely floating a bit with wind magic. The arrogant noble, however, remained unimpressed, scoffing at Owen's audacity to pretend to fly using mere wind magic as Owen continued to float with his arms outstretched. Katerina-sensei addressed her students, acknowledging that while some had excelled and others struggled with magic today, they should not worry. She confidently declared that a 3-star mage like herself would teach them everything from this point forward, concluding the lesson for the day. With a decisive gesture, she dismissed the class, prompting Owen to react with a surprised expression as the lesson officially concluded. He then turned to Natalie, inquiring if she had any plans for the moment. She replied that she was simply heading back to the dorm. Seeing that she was free, Natalie then suggested they go to the business area together, inviting him to join her on a shopping spree. He wondered internally if this unexpected invitation could possibly be a date, his face flushing slightly at the thought. Moments later, they arrived at the bustling shopping area, a vibrant district filled with various establishments. As they walked, she inquired what he intended to buy. He responded that he had nothing particular in mind, as everything he needed had already been sent from home. She then clarified, with a cheerful smile, that they were simply exploring today, suggesting he might be curious to learn about the place they would be living in from now on. He found her enthusiasm adorable and admitted to himself that he was indeed curious about their new surroundings. They continued their exploration, passing by various vendors and stalls, with Owen eagerly pointing out interesting sights while Natalie smiled, enjoying their outing together. As Owen and Natalie enjoyed their outing, a male student with glasses suddenly appeared, agitated and demanding his medicine from Owen. Owen, startled, looked on with a mix of confusion and concern, while Natalie watched the unfolding scene with wide eyes. The student lunged forward, reiterating his demand for the medicine. Owen realized he had no time to cast a fireball, leaving him vulnerable to the unexpected assault. The student then employed gravity magic to float and directly attack Owen, catching him completely off guard as he was struck by the unexpected maneuver. Owen was knocked to the ground by the impact. Natalie immediately rushed to his side, asking if he was all right, while a dark-haired student observed the commotion from a distance, wondering about the attacker's strange behavior. The dark-haired student stepped forward, interrupting the scene to apologize for the disturbance and claiming the agitated attacker as his friend. Owen and Natalie looked at him, surprised by his sudden intervention. He explained that his friend suffered from neurosis and must have run out of his sedatives. He assured Owen and Natalie that he would personally inform the teachers, dismissing their concerns. The dark-haired student then smiled to himself, realizing he had encountered an unthinkable windfall. Meanwhile, Owen, still on the ground, reflected that he had only intended to test if the other student could serve as a tool to provoke the dark-haired student. But the attacker's use of flight magic had been an unexpected development. The dark-haired student glanced back at Owen and Natalie, his expression shifting as he considered that Owen might now be of much greater interest in. 2 weeks had passed since the entrance ceremony, and the students had grown accustomed to their new daily lives. Their female teacher explained the intricacies of magic, detailing how full magic power and physical materialization combined to create an intermediate state, allowing for free control. He found studying magic still enjoyable, though the more difficult theoretical aspects reminded him somewhat of chemistry. Later, in the elementary education practice field, she announced that their lesson for the day would revolve around magic control. She demonstrated the concept, explaining that magic control involved moving the magic power within oneself to focus it fully on a single point. Meanwhile, among the students, the blonde girl remarked that they could already perform such a feat to some lesser extent, implying it was a familiar concept. The teacher continued, illustrating how the distance between the caster and the magic affected its potency. She clarified that while long-distance magic was not highly valued by the school, it was a technique that grew more difficult with increasing distance, causing the effects of one's magic to become less impressive. He, however, whispered to himself, questioning the very point of such a technique if it was so limited. With a different mindset, he declared, "Come forth." Ice flow. A massive, jagged shard of ice materialized high above, causing another male student to gasp in astonishment. With a simple gesture, he caused the colossal ice flow to crumble instantly into countless shimmering fragments, demonstrating an unexpected mastery. As the students processed the protagonist's unusual display, their teacher continued the lesson, explaining that varied attacks were possible, which allowed for greater tactical flexibility. She then demonstrated that if one could only conjure magic from their immediate body, opponents could easily focus their defenses and guard against the attack. She further elaborated that an enemy could simply predict the expected line of fire and erect a wall or similar defense, or even prepare evasion methods, if the magic's origin was too obvious. However, she then posed a question: what happens when, during a back-and-forth exchange, a block of ice is suddenly dropped from above? The foe would have to divide their attention across far more vectors of attack, wearing down their concentration. She emphasized the clear distinction between those who could utilize long-distance magic and those who could not. She revealed that among her acquaintances, there was a person who could freely control her magic even at a distance of tens of meters, though she would not teach them to quite that level. The protagonist listened intently. She then instructed the students to use their favored magics and practice activating them at increasing distances, adding that there was no harm in getting the hang of it. She invited anyone with questions to approach her before turning away, signaling the start of practice. As the students began their practice, the protagonist found himself struggling, muttering that it was truly difficult. He recalled that Katarina-sensei had always been exceptionally skilled at long-distance magic, realizing she must have been an amazing person all along without him fully understanding. He grew frustrated, not wanting to bother waiting for his turn for advice. He then wondered when everyone else had managed to line up so quickly. He then wondered if he could find someone else to teach him, and his gaze fell upon Berg, considering him as a potential mentor. He turned to Berg, asking for guidance on long-distance magic, assuming that Berg's specialty in body strengthening would mean he possessed excellent magic control. Berg, however, reacted with surprise, revealing that he actually could not use magic at all, having no talent for it. He clarified that his body strengthening was achieved by circulating magic power through his body to enhance his physical abilities, rather than materializing intended phenomena, as traditional magic did. He admitted he did not understand why he was unable to use magic in the conventional sense, which was why he had dedicated all his efforts to body strengthening. Owen understood the immense difficulty of Berg's situation, being a prince in a magic supremacist country, yet unable to wield magic. Berg then shared that he had overcome that hardship after meeting a respected teacher, a sentiment Owen deeply empathized with. Owen apologized for burdening Berg, but Berg quickly dismissed his concerns, encouraging them both to do their best. Meanwhile, the line of students waiting for the teacher's guidance showed little sign of decreasing. He realized the lesson had ended before he could even ask the teacher for advice. His current limit for long-distance magic remained around 50 centimeters, a frustratingly difficult distance. Unwilling to give up, he continued his practice at the field well into the night. He reflected that his knowledge from another world freed him from this world's conventional understanding, allowing him to perceive magic as pure imagination. He sat in a meditative pose, contemplating that if he could master this approach, he might achieve something extraordinary again, much like when he first developed flight magic. He was imagining a formidable monster, wielding a legendary sword, and felt a surge of confidence that his unique approach to magic, blending his efforts with his knowledge of games, might finally yield results. His eyes sparkled with excitement and determination as he focused intently on this burgeoning idea. Moments later, he looked up at the night sky, a triumphant smile gracing his lips, exclaiming that something profound had just come to him, and that magic was truly fun after all. The teacher observed him from a distance, a thoughtful expression on her face. A month had passed since the entrance ceremony. The teacher, standing before her class, announced that the martial tournament was scheduled to begin this very week. This tournament, a significant event organized by the school, would pit students against their fellow pupils in magical battles, testing their skills and resolve. Back in the classroom, the teacher informed the students that she had already decided on the participants. The elementary education department's event would be a team battle, with several first-year students from their class representing them. She then began to name the chosen students, starting with Berg, who offered a confident smile, and then Natalie, who also smiled gently. Finally, she announced Owen's name, causing him to gasp in utter surprise. He was utterly flustered, questioning why he had been chosen, though he could understand the selection of the other two. From the back of the classroom, Chris, one of the other students, stood up abruptly, slamming her hand on her desk, and loudly declared to the teacher that she could not accept that choice. Still reeling from the announcement, she vehemently questioned why someone like Owen would be chosen for such an important event. Owen, standing beside her, looked utterly bewildered by her outburst, while Berg watched the scene unfold with wide eyes. Her protest continued, challenging the teacher's judgment directly. The teacher, however, remained composed, calmly asking if Chris's true objection stemmed from her own disappointment at not being selected. Chris stammered, attempting to deny it. Despite the denial, the teacher acknowledged that it might be difficult for Chris to accept her decision. With a decisive gesture, she declared that they would proceed nonetheless. To settle the matter, the teacher announced a mock battle. The winner of this contest, she explained, would earn the right to participate in the martial meet. The contenders would be Owen and a student named Dominic. A murmur of excitement rippled through the assembled students. As the announcement settled, the student previously known as Chris, now identified as Dominic, stepped forward with fierce determination. He declared himself the inevitable victor, vowing to prove his worth against the ruinous House Pepper. Owen, observing Dominic's intensity, privately thought the situation had spiraled far beyond his control. Dominic's fervor continued, as he sharply told Owen to be silent, even threatening him. Owen, taken aback by the aggression, internally mused that such self-involved language was best avoided, though he admitted to having used similar words in his own past. Soon after, the students were led to the elementary education's practice field, a walled arena designed for such contests. The teacher stood before them, explaining that the rules for their mock battle were straightforward. She further clarified that the victor would be determined either by her judgment or by an opponent's surrender. Owen and Dominic stood opposite each other, their expressions serious as they prepared for the impending duel. With the rules established, the teacher gave the command to begin. Dominic wasted no time, immediately unleashing a flame bullet towards Owen. Owen, caught off guard by the swiftness of the attack, watched as the fiery projectile rapidly expanded, hurtling towards him. As the attack closed in, Owen instinctively conjured a fire wall to protect himself, successfully repelling Dominic's fiery assault. Dominic, observing Owen's defensive magic, acknowledged internally that his opponent, a fellow fire magic user, was proving to be quite formidable. He considered his options, realizing that while he possessed gravity magic, it was a poor match for his current opponent. Furthermore, he understood that attempting to use any other magic while flying would be akin to inviting an attack. Dominic, sensing Owen's internal struggle or perhaps his hesitation, challenged him directly, suggesting they put Owen's capabilities to the test. As Dominic extended his hand, preparing to unleash a powerful spell, he declared his intent to show Owen what true firepower looked like. With a fervent incantation, Dominic called upon a formidable entity, commanding it to arrive with scorching ardor and annihilate his foe. Owen watched, his eyes wide with shock. A colossal, fiery beast, an ifrit, erupted from the ground, its immense form towering over Dominic. He smiled confidently, urging the creature to meet his expectations. The ifrit's monstrous form continued to solidify, its fiery essence radiating immense power, as Dominic stood before it, seemingly unfazed by its raw might. Dominic, still smiling, reiterated his command to the ifrit, expecting it to perform as he desired. The ifrit roared, charging forward at Dominic's command, its massive body shaking the ground. Natalie and Berg, observing from a distance, were utterly astonished by the display of power. Owen, caught off guard by the sheer scale of the summoned creature and its attack, stared in disbelief as a torrent of dark, fiery energy surged towards him. He realized the gravity of the situation, understanding that this was not good. Dominic, observing Owen's stunned reaction, wondered if he might have overdone it, questioning if Owen was even capable of defending himself against such an overwhelming attack. She cried out, struggling to maintain control of the summoned ifrit, warning Owen to get out of the way or face death, admitting she could barely contain its power. Owen, stunned, could only utter a confused sound. The elemental's uncontrolled power erupted, shattering the ground and sending shards of ice and debris flying. Moments later, Owen lay defeated on the shattered ground, while Dominic stood over him, her expression a mix of concern and exasperation, realizing she had overdone it for goodness sake. As Dominic looked on, Owen, still recovering, admitted he had gotten too excited during the mock battle. He then thanked her profusely for the instruction, acknowledging the valuable lesson. His enthusiasm quickly returned as he declared that he would participate in the martial meet, a decision that surprised Dominic. A teacher, standing nearby, announced Owen Pepper as the winner of the match. Owen internally reflected that his school life was still going swimmingly well. The second volume of the Chronicle opens, depicting Owen and Natalie, ready for new adventures. The cover art, now in monochrome, reiterates their determined expressions as they face the challenges ahead. The table of contents outlines the upcoming chapters, promising further developments in their journey. Chapter 7 begins, showcasing Owen, Natalie, and a new male student, all poised for action. Far in the distance, the silhouette of Zansar Academy stood against the cloudy sky, preparing to host its annual martial arts tournament. The day of the tournament had arrived, and the city surrounding the academy buzzed with anticipation, its rooftops stretching endlessly under the clear sky. Amidst the bustling streets, Natalie and the new male student navigated through the crowds, observing the lively atmosphere as vendors called out to passersby. Meanwhile, Owen and Natalie arrived at the grand arena, and he expressed his surprise at the sheer vibrancy of the event, noting the oath of fair play being announced. Natalie, with a thoughtful expression, explained that the competition would span 3 days, with the intermediate and advanced finals on the third day promising to be far more exciting than the elementary education matches of the second. The teacher concluded his opening remarks, stating that was all for his speech. Owen, observing, realized their part was merely the opening act. As fireworks erupted across the sky, a grand announcement declared the commencement of the 52nd tournament. The tournament officially began, and the rules were swiftly explained. Students would compete using magic in designated arenas. Outcomes would be judged by a referee. Each department would have its own brackets, and the elementary education department's matches would be a best 2 out of 3. Moments later, Owen, Natalie, and Berg found themselves in a waiting room. Owen noted their first opponent would be a third-year student. Natalie, with a determined expression, declared that their only option was to win. Owen, understanding the implications, conceded that it would indeed be embarrassing for first-years to lose. Berg, brimming with confidence, asserted that they could certainly win, questioning if Owen truly believed it would be easy. Owen, still somewhat uncertain, pressed him on how he could be so sure. Berg simply replied that it would not be a problem with their combined power. He continued, dismissing the strength of the upperclassmen, though he acknowledged hearing that the student council president was very powerful. Natalie then chimed in, agreeing with Berg and asking Owen why he seemed so worried. She confidently declared that everything would be fine, emphasizing their strength. Owen, however, harbored an internal doubt, realizing he had only ever truly fought against Katarina-sensei and Dominic, leaving him unsure of his actual capabilities. He reacted with surprise, questioning why he, of all people, was chosen as the Teisho, or captain. Natalie and Berg, however, affirmed that he was indeed the strongest among them. He humbly attributed his strength to knowledge from a previous life, but Natalie quickly dismissed his modesty, reminding him that few 10-year-olds could wield flight magic as he did. He insisted it wasn't true. Despite his reservations, he eventually conceded, promising to do his best as captain. Berg, with a cheerful grin, encouraged him. Berg, radiating confidence, declared their team would give it their all, prompting a small, internal observation from Owen about his friend's shining demeanor. Soon after, an announcement called for the first-year team to prepare. The crowd murmured with anticipation as the call went out for the Senpos, the vanguard or first in line, to step forward. With a determined expression, Berg confidently proclaimed his intent to win. As he descended the steps towards the arena, Owen and Natalie offered words of encouragement, cheering him on. He stood poised in the arena, a confident smile gracing his face, ready to begin his match as the team's Senpo. In a swift and decisive move, Berg emerged victorious, sending his opponent soaring through the air. The announcer declared Berg written as the winner. Owen, impressed, urged Natalie to perform well, reminding her of the stakes. She, in turn, declared it was her moment to enter the fray. Natalie, now the team's Chukin, or middle position, stepped onto the arena floor, her expression resolute and ready for her own match. She stood on the arena floor, the roar of the crowd intensifying around her as the second match was about to begin. The sheer volume of the spectators was overwhelming, yet she understood their excitement. Owen, observing from the sidelines, noted the crowd's wild enthusiasm. As the match commenced, Owen and Berg discussed her prowess, with Berg explaining that the Adelheid family specialized in lightning magic, one of the most powerful forms. Indeed, Natalie was already overwhelming her opponent, unleashing a barrage of lightning that left no room for counterattack. She continued her relentless assault, conjuring a powerful lightning spear that struck her opponent with devastating force, eliciting a cry of pain. With the match decisively won, the referee declared Natalie Adelheid the victor. She offered a polite thank you, while Owen and Berg cheered her on, congratulating her on her swift triumph. Owen, processing the outcome, realized the implications. If both Berg and Natalie had won their matches, then the first-class team had already secured victory. A sudden understanding dawned on him. Natalie approached him, suggesting they take a breather. He, however, was consumed by frustration, realizing he had never even gotten a turn to fight. The subsequent matches that followed also resulted in dominating wins for Berg and Natalie, solidifying the first year's victory. Owen remained visibly dejected, his earlier hopes of participating dashed. He stood alone, a profound sense of uselessness washing over him. He had won without doing anything, and the thought gnawed at him. If he won without contributing, did that make him useless? Natalie then announced her intention to spectate the second-year matches and asked Berg about his plans. She then turned to Owen, suggesting their matches for the day were over and proposing they get lunch. He looked up, surprised by the suggestion. As they walked, Owen asked Natalie if her parents had come to see her fight. She replied that they were both busy. He then reflected on his own parents, who were also often preoccupied, and decided he would worry about it after he ate. He found himself reflecting on his past life, specifically on his parents, who would always attend his events. He felt a pang of regret, apologizing internally for his death, though the circumstances remained a blur. His thoughts were interrupted as Natalie called out to him, asking if something was amiss. He quickly dismissed her concern, agreeing with Chris that they should proceed. As they moved, they observed the bustling crowd. Natalie remarked on the sheer number of spectators, while Chris noted the buzz surrounding the first-year students this time. Other students nearby were already discussing the first years, with one male student exclaiming about Berg's prowess and another female student finding Natalie adorable. They also mentioned the third prince and the Duchess. He overheard their conversation and turned to Chris, who was also listening. Chris wondered if they could win the championship, but doubted they could defeat the student council president, the very person Berg had spoken of. She then elaborated on the tournament strategy, explaining that the president, likely viewing their Taisho as a weakling, would probably fight their Senpo or Chukin to prevent them from winning again. His internal monologue was cut short as he realized the rumors Chris was discussing about an incompetent pepper guy were actually about him. He was shocked. The other students continued their cruel remarks, hoping he would flip out when he inevitably lost, and suggesting his defeat would be a good wake-up call. Chris, hearing this, urged them to stop. Suddenly, Natalie, who had been eavesdropping, erupted in anger. She accused the two students of spouting nonsense and loudly called out Owen's name. She then declared her identity, stating she was Natalie Adelheid, leaving the two gossiping students stunned and questioning her claim. She clung to Owen, her voice rising in a desperate plea. I just know it. Owen could win the entire tournament by himself. Owen, startled by her intensity, could only utter a bewildered cry. She then declared that they should leave, taking Owen with them. As she began to walk away, her back to him, Owen followed, attempting to understand her distress. He asked if she was angry about the earlier comments. She clarified that she wasn't angry, but rather frustrated by the horrible things people had been saying about it. Her frustration was palpable. Tears welled in her eyes as she covered her mouth, unable to articulate the depth of her feelings. Seeing her tears, Owen realized with a jolt that she was crying for him. He watched her for a moment. Then, a determined glint in his eye, he proposed a daring plan for the final match. He would fight the student council president himself. Owen, standing amidst a group of students and teachers, boldly asked Natalie if she would permit him to fight the student council president. Natalie looked on, surprised by his direct challenge. She, with a determined glint in her eyes, responded by making him promise that he would win the fight. With Natalie's words echoing, Owen stood ready, a glowing orb of energy manifesting in his hand, alongside a senior student who appeared equally prepared for the impending confrontation. Later, in a waiting room, the senior student confirmed his agreement, stating that he believed it would indeed be best if Owen were the one to face the president. He further explained that the situation didn't sit well with him either, a sentiment Owen readily echoed, calling the senior student a truly good person. Owen, however, still harbored some reservations. The senior student then elaborated, suggesting there was a good chance the president would attempt a Chukin match against Natalie this time, and if it followed previous years' patterns, the president would only challenge the opposing team's strongest players. He then cautioned Owen, remarking that even he might not find it easy to defeat the president. Owen's expression tightened with concern as he processed the information, realizing the student council president was widely reputed to be the strongest. He turned to the senior student, asking if the president was truly that formidable, reminding him that he had witnessed the previous match. The senior student confirmed the president's prowess, revealing him to be a wind magic user. He then expressed his doubt that Owen's flame abilities would have an easy time against such powerful wind magic. He pondered the upcoming challenge, realizing the student council president left no openings, neither in his formidable attacks nor his impenetrable defenses. The senior student continued, explaining that the president could protect himself with a powerful, wide-range defensive wall, capable of repelling or sweeping away all normal magic. Furthermore, his offense was equally incredible, barraging opponents with high-powered magic without giving them a moment to breathe, as another student was shown being overwhelmed. Owen reacted with a stunned expression, questioning the unfairness of such power. The senior student affirmed that thanks to his vast experience, the president could nullify most magic and possessed excellent judgment, making him a truly formidable opponent. The senior student then considered the only potential path to victory, suggesting that if they could somehow make the president underestimate his opponent, there might be a chance, as allowing him to gain momentum would make him unbeatable. Owen conceded that a surprise attack seemed like the most viable strategy, but immediately doubted his ability to strengthen himself quickly enough for such a tactic. The senior student, however, advised him to physically enhance himself as much as possible and then launch a swift surprise attack. Later, Natalie approached Owen, who still appeared troubled. She playfully reminded him of his promise to win, but then quickly reassured him, stating that even if he were to lose, she would still be there to support him. He grumbled in response, prompting Natalie to clarify with a laugh that she was only kidding, and emphatically urged him to make sure he secured the victory. Returning to their discussion, Owen admitted to the senior student that he probably couldn't win against the president through normal means. The senior student agreed, emphasizing the necessity of devising a concrete plan. As the day drew to a close, Owen stood before a grand arena, contemplating their next steps. He resolved to determine what actions they could take before tomorrow, and asked the senior student to provide him with tips on how to strengthen his body in the interim. The next day, the first match concluded with Berg Ritten declared the winner, leaving him sprawled on the ground in exhaustion. Owen observed the proceedings, his own match looming. He watched the next match with keen interest, noting his opponent's calm demeanor and formidable strength. Moments later, the announcer's voice boomed, introducing the next participant, the first year, Owen Pepper. A wave of boos and jeers erupted from the crowd. The crowd continued to express their disinterest, dismissing Owen as a weakling and predicting a boring match. Then, the announcer introduced his opponent, Kaizef Standard, a third-year student and the formidable student council president. Owen was taken aback by the stark difference in the crowd's reaction, as Kaizef received enthusiastic cheers and encouragement, with many urging him not to go easy on the first year. Kaizef then addressed Owen directly, expressing surprise that the Chukin match was not against Natalie. He declared that he had been bested, leaving Owen to question his meaning. He elaborated, admitting he had been outsmarted. Kaizef had believed that once he defeated Natalie, the rest of the game would be an easy victory. Owen clenched his fist, a silent protest against Kaizef's assumption that he was intentionally disrupting his plans. He knew he wasn't truly confident in his own strength, but Natalie was counting on it. Kaizef, with a knowing smirk, told Owen to take it easy. But Owen, his eyes blazing with resolve, declared he would strike with everything he had. He focused on the elementary education department finals, initiated his attack by strengthening his legs. His opponent, a student with light-colored hair, countered swiftly with wind magic, launching blades of wind. Undeterred, he seized an opening, unleashing a barrage of fireballs. His opponent, however, quickly responded by conjuring a powerful vortex of winds, deflecting the fiery assault. Surprised by his opponent's rapid transition between offense and defense, he internally acknowledged the difficulty of the match. Despite thinking he should have won by now, he refused to give up, preparing to unleash a more potent spell. With a determined cry, he summoned Ifrit, a massive, roaring hellfire creature, which manifested with immense power on the arena floor. The spectators, including Natalie, Chris, and Berg, watched in stunned silence, questioning the nature of such powerful magic. Natalie and Chris, however, exchanged smiles, clearly impressed by his display. His opponent stared in disbelief at the fiery manifestation, recognizing the sheer power of the magic. He observed the swirling inferno, realizing that while the shortened chant had made the spell less powerful, it was still the most potent magic he could currently wield. He wondered if his attack had been successful. Suddenly, his opponent emerged from the flames, unharmed, and lunged forward, executing a raging blade, attack designed to slice through anything in its path. He cried out in pain as the attack connected. He cried out in pain as the attack landed, leaving him stunned and injured. From the sidelines, Natalie watched in horror, her voice filled with desperate concern as she called his name. His opponent, standing over him, acknowledged Owen's strength, stating that he was sorry for underestimating him. As the battle continued, Owen found himself trapped within a swirling vortex of wind, a powerful barrier that his opponent declared unbreakable. He gritted his teeth, realizing the true, serious intent behind his opponent's actions. Owen, with a determined glint in his eye, declared his intent to unleash his full power from this moment forward. A swirling vortex of energy began to manifest at his feet. The vortex he conjured rapidly expanded, transforming into a colossal, destructive whirlwind that tore through the arena. However, the powerful winds immediately turned against him, catching him off guard. He stumbled, crying out as the sharp blades of air buffeted his body. Meanwhile, his friends Natalie and Chris watched in growing concern. Owen struggled desperately, realizing the relentless wind blades were constantly following him, making it impossible to activate his own magic. Despite the relentless assault, he resolved to fight back, believing that half-hearted magic would be useless. With a fierce, almost sinister expression, he prepared to unleash his most potent fire magic, calling forth the Ifrit to destroy his enemy with the fires of hell. Yet, the immense magical blast of Ifrit exploded, only for the wind blades to remain, seemingly unaffected. Owen stared in disbelief, his most powerful magic having failed to make any impact. The relentless wind continued its assault, violently throwing him backward as he cried out in pain. His opponent, observing Owen's struggle, calmly remarked that if he could do nothing, he should simply give up. He added that Owen lacked sufficient experience, stating that while he expected more from a mage, Owen was, in the end, merely a first-year student, and true magical excellence came from accumulated experience, not just talent. The powerful gusts continued to batter Owen, throwing him around violently as dark blood splattered from his wounds. Below, Natalie, Chris, and Bird watched in horror, their faces etched with fear. The terrifying whirlwind persisted, its destructive force unabated. Natalie, her voice trembling, wondered aloud if Owen was going to die, while Chris desperately urged someone to stop the assault. As Owen continued to endure the relentless assault, Natalie, unable to bear witness any longer, cried out and attempted to rush forward, only to be restrained by another student who grimly acknowledged the opponent's overwhelming power. He held her back, reminding her that Owen had promised he would not be defeated despite the dire circumstances. Natalie, still distressed, then looked towards Owen, observing the fierce resolve in his eyes. She declared that he had not given up. Just as she spoke, a powerful blow struck Owen, sending him reeling once more, prompting Natalie to scream his name in anguish. Despite the repeated impacts, Owen remained trapped within the swirling wind barrier, his mind racing. He recalled Natalie's words, acknowledging that giving up now would be pathetic, and pondered how to breach the formidable typhoon of wind surrounding him. A sudden thought struck him, a typhoon. The realization solidified in his mind. If it was truly a typhoon, then it must possess an eye, a calm center. This was his only chance, a do-or-die gamble. With a surge of desperate resolve, he activated a powerful spell, declaring gravitational release. As he did, his body defied the wind, rising into the air. Below, his friends watched in stunned disbelief, exclaiming Owen's name and questioning how he could possibly be flying. The student who had restrained Natalie earlier stared up, utterly bewildered. He recognized the wind magic Owen had demonstrated in class, but insisted it was impossible to use it with such a strong current. Natalie and Chris echoed his surprise. As Owen maintained his position suspended in the air, his friends could only stare, a new question forming in their minds. Could this be the legendary flight magic? He confirmed his earlier observation. The wind barrier swirled around Kaizef, leaving the area directly above him clear. This was the opening he needed. With a surge of physical reinforcement, he initiated a gravitational release and plunged downward in an elevated free fall, catching Kaizef completely by surprise as he descended from above. Owen struck Kaizef with a powerful iron fist, landing a direct blow. Kaizef reeled from the impact, questioning if this was a form of taijutsu. Natalie and Chris watched, exclaiming that the fight was far from over and that Owen had successfully breached the wind barrier. Kaizef, recovering, cursed the disruption to his wind magic and attempted to cast another spell, but Owen declared he would not allow it. Owen continued his relentless assault, striking Kaizef again. He recalled Natalie's words during their training. The basics of taijutsu involved observing an opponent and striking when they were off guard, especially when they were busy guarding their upper body. As Kaizef attempted to cast magic once more, Owen, remembering the lesson, declared his intention to aim low and delivered a swift kick. Chris's voice echoed in his mind, explaining that this was the fundamental anti-magic combat technique using taijutsu. He had advised Owen to watch the opponent's hand and dodge, emphasizing that a loss of balance would prevent them from fine-tuning their aim. Back in the present, Owen continued his close-quarters barrage, striking Kaizef repeatedly. Kaizef, surprised by the unexpected skill, acknowledged that despite being a first year, Owen had clearly trained extensively with his mentors. Owen delivered another powerful iron fist blow, striking Kaizef squarely. He internally affirmed that his training had not been limited to magic alone, recalling the rigorous taijutsu sessions with Natalie and Chris. Suddenly, Kaizef, pushed to his limits, began to channel a massive amount of magical energy, preparing to unleash a devastating, colossal fireball spell. Kaizef's imposing form loomed over Owen, who lay defeated on the ground, struggling to rise. From the sidelines, Natalie and Chris watched with growing alarm, urging him to stay down, fearing further injury. He slumped against a severely cracked wall, the impact of the previous attack evident. A voice boomed across the arena, declaring the victor. Suddenly, he was engulfed in a celebratory embrace from Natalie and Chris, their faces beaming with joy. The announcer's voice continued, revealing the shocking outcome. And the winner is Owen Pepper. What a shocker. The winning team for the elementary education department is the first-year team. Owen, still dazed, could only manage a soft, pained sound. His friends continued their enthusiastic congratulations, while in the stands, other students murmured in disbelief. No wonder he was selected, one exclaimed, while another added, Pepper was absolutely amazing, wasn't he? However, one student, his face contorted in rage, clenched his fist, seething that it should have been him, not Owen Pepper, who stood victorious. Inside a grand building, a desperate internal struggle raged. One voice cried out that the beast within could no longer be controlled, while another echoed the sentiment, unable to endure it any longer. The source of this internal turmoil seemed to be a young woman, Natalie, who flushed with embarrassment, pleading with someone named Owen not to act so brazenly in such a public place. Owen, equally distressed, begged Natalie for just a moment, insisting that just the tip would be fine, his face contorted in a desperate plea. Ignoring her pleas, he devoured the food with gusto, exclaiming his delight. He reasoned that after an intense magical battle, he was fiercely hungry and needed to eat as much as he could, despite Natalie's warning that he would get a stomach ache if he stuffed himself so much. As he continued to eat, a young woman with dark red hair approached him from behind, causing him to turn and demand that she not stand so close while he was trying to enjoy his meal. She explained that she was merely trying to have a talk, emphasizing that a victory celebration was not just about eating a hearty meal, but also about networking and meeting influential people from other schools. He, however, remained focused on his food, stating he would love to meet them, but was currently busy eating. Despite her efforts, he found it hard to start a conversation, remaining engrossed in his meal while other students and faculty mingled around them. Suddenly, a tall, elegant man with long blonde hair, whom Natalie recognized as Chris Senpai, approached them, remarking on the noise. He then greeted Owen, who seemed surprised to see him, asking if he had become a teacher at Central. The world contained 4 major schools of magic: Zansar, where Owen was currently enrolled, Central, Waltz, and Heron Matter. These 4 schools actively exchanged ideas and helped each other improve, with faculty from other schools often observing events at one another's institutions. Ren, with a knowing smile, praised the legendary magic of Pepper, recalling a splendid comeback in the finals. Chris, however, quickly interjected, downplaying the significance of flight magic. He then leaned in close to Owen, his expression shifting to a more intense one, and asked if Owen was also interested in witches. Owen recoiled, visibly startled by the sudden proximity and the unsettling question. Chris, observing the interaction, immediately reacted with a sharp warning, telling Ren he was getting too close and questioning if he was attempting to poach her student. Ren, feigning innocence, raised his hands in a gesture of surprise. He casually adjusted his hair, acknowledging his interest in Pepper, but asserting that he also had capable students of his own. With a dismissive wave, he then called out to someone, instructing them to introduce themselves. Chris and Owen exchanged confused glances, wondering who he was addressing. A young boy, appearing incredibly shy, stepped forward and hesitantly introduced himself as Thor, a first-year student. Ren, with a proud smile, remarked that despite his shyness, Thor's talent was undeniable. Chris, however, sensed a deeper tension, declaring that she could smell bloodlust emanating from the boy. Ren, seemingly unfazed, merely chuckled, commenting that he had expected Zansar to be more competent, capable of competing with the intermediate education department. Owen, noticing the palpable hostility from Thor, questioned Chris about the nature of their relationship, observing that Thor wasn't even attempting to hide his animosity. Ren then announced their departure, instructing Thor to follow him. As they walked away, Chris explained to Owen that Thor had once been a sweet person, always following her and Katarina around when they were seniors at Zansar. She revealed that an incident long ago had changed him, causing him to act strangely ever since. She then turned to Owen, sternly advising him to think more carefully before acting, emphasizing that one's actions could profoundly influence others. Owen, absorbing her words, acknowledged her point. He looked up, startled, as a voice sharply questioned if he was deaf. Chris then revealed she knew a great deal about him even before his enrollment, much to his embarrassment. She further explained that she and Katarina were once rivals, constantly pushing each other to improve by vying for the top spot, a fact that surprised Owen, who had not realized his teachers were former classmates. Owen, feeling a surge of pride, boasted about Katarina-sensei being a genius. Chris, however, clarified that Katarina was the only one who consistently surpassed her in magic, always proving to be better. As Chris imagined Katarina, she abruptly snapped at Owen, accusing him of thinking something inappropriate. She sternly advised him to stop wasting his free time on foolish thoughts and instead use it to mingle with others. He found himself struggling with the idea of mingling, lamenting that socializing in this new world was proving to be quite difficult. He wondered what he was even supposed to talk about with a stranger, contemplating simply hiding in a corner. Just as he pondered his social predicament, a cheerful young woman approached him, introducing herself as Monet and declaring herself a huge fan of his performance in the martial arts tournament. Owen looked on, surprised by the sudden attention. Monet enthusiastically explained that she had been trying to talk to him for a long time and felt much better now that he had beaten up an annoying bastard. As Owen processed her words, another young man, Kaizef, casually greeted Monet. Owen, confused, realized Monet was referring to him when she mentioned beating someone in the finals, and he questioned if she was calling him an annoying bastard. Monet, ignoring Owen, turned her attention to Kaizef, declaring that he was as cold as ever and that seeing his face made her want to punch him. Kaizef, unfazed, simply acknowledged her presence. She continued her outburst, stating that his very presence infuriated her and that she did not recall ever losing to him. Kaizef, with a slight smirk, calmly suggested that perhaps it was because she always lost to him. He, with a slight smile, remarked on the apparent closeness between Monet and Owen. Monet, however, vehemently denied it, asserting they were not close at all. Monet continued her denial, declaring them enemies. Kaizef, unfazed, suggested they were merely friends in spirit, recalling their past as classmates in another school where they hit it off as first years, describing their relationship as such. Owen observed the exchange, noting that Kaizef seemed to have a rival who constantly argued with him, a dynamic he could relate to. He then dismissed the idea of Kaizef being his rival, shaking his head and hands emphatically, stating that Kaizef saw him as an enemy. Monet, still engaged in conversation, mentioned that Kaizef had a brother with the same hair color as him, who wore a central uniform and was very shy. Owen, surprised, asked if she meant brother. Monet then pointed directly at Owen, confirming that he was the one who had been talking to her brother earlier, a realization that struck Owen with a sudden flash of understanding. Monet expressed her hope that Owen would get along nicely with her brother. Owen, still processing the revelation, responded that he was a nice boy, though he barely talked to him and didn't remember much of their brief interaction. Monet, with a frustrated expression, shouted at Owen to shut it, as he continued to comment on how close she and her brother seemed. Owen suddenly clutched his stomach, feeling a sharp pain, and wondered if he had eaten too much. Still holding his stomach, Owen apologized and excused himself, stating he needed to go to the bathroom and would leave the youngsters alone. Monet, surprised by his abrupt departure, called out for him to wait. He ran frantically through the unfamiliar halls, his stomach churning with urgency. This wasn't the elementary department building, and he had no idea where to find a bathroom. Crap, he thought, this is bad. Then, a thought struck him. He could simply ask someone. He paused, hearing voices from around the corner, and wondered who was speaking. Peeking cautiously around the corner, he saw Ren, who was speaking with an urgent tone. He recognized the teacher and realized the situation might be more complex than a simple conversation. As he rushed away, he collided abruptly with another student, sending a jolt through both of them. The impact exacerbated his stomach pain, and he cried out in agony, realizing he couldn't hold it much longer. He cursed his predicament. The student he bumped into, a calm young man, pointed him towards the bathroom, just around the corner. Owen, relieved, apologized profusely and thanked him, barely making it in time. The other student also expressed relief, admitting he too had been in a similar predicament. Having successfully relieved himself, Owen emerged, profusely thanking the student who had helped him, and then rushed off, eager to put the embarrassing ordeal behind him. The student watched him go, a slight, knowing smile on his face. The student, still smiling, mused internally about Owen, wondering if he harbored any ulterior motives, and expressed surprise that Owen had won whatever internal struggle he was facing. Owen, still visibly flustered from his ordeal, continued to run, while the observant student watched him, concluding that, whatever his reasons, Owen was an interesting fellow. Owen, his face a mask of pure relief, burst through the door, having reached the toilet just in time. He reflected on the recent conclusion of the first-year martial arts tournament, noting that his reputation had improved, albeit slightly. This memory was now intertwined with the lingering, vivid recollection of his severe stomachache. A few days after the tournament concluded, Owen, known to many as Pepper, found himself back in the rhythm of student life. His reputation had soared thanks to his remarkable feat of defeating the student council president, and he was now constantly praised by his peers, though he still felt unaccustomed to the attention. As he walked, Natalie approached him. He excitedly informed Natalie that he had developed a brand new magic spell after winning the tournament and eagerly sought her opinion on it. However, she merely looked at him with a distinct lack of enthusiasm. He noticed her uncharacteristic expression and called her name, a hint of concern in his voice. She turned away sharply, her face etched with annoyance, and told him to find another girl to impress, asserting that he now had plenty of options. He stared, bewildered by her sudden anger. The scene shifted to an outdoor classroom, where a lesson was about to begin, focusing on the subjects of demons and magic stones. The headmaster, known as Teacher Squad, began the lesson by confirming that demons were ferocious creatures possessing magical powers that attack people. He then inquired if anyone had heard of them before, and after a brief pause, asked the class how demons were born. He then called upon Natalie, who, along with another student, had raised her hand to answer. She explained that magic stones accumulate miasma, causing them to turn a cloudy white. Eventually, a demon is born with this corrupted magic stone serving as its nucleus. The headmaster praised Natalie's answer as perfect, adding that this phenomenon was particularly common in low-purity magic stones. Owen, observing from nearby, remarked on how cool Natalie was, contrasting her with his own perceived lesser status as Pepper-sama. He continued his lecture, explaining that magic stones also serve as power sources for magical tools and can conveniently replenish a magic user's mana in emergencies. He stressed the importance of this information, especially for those who might find themselves in danger. Owen, noticing Natalie's pensive expression, inquired about her thoughts. She responded by explaining that while monster-slaying practice was typically reserved for third-year students, it was an inherent duty for nobles to exterminate demons, a responsibility they must always remember. As they spoke, Owen then noticed the presence of the headmaster and Chris, questioning why 3 teachers were present at what he assumed was Squad Sensei's lecture. Chris, with a wide, enthusiastic grin, then revealed the true purpose of their gathering. They were about to begin practicing demon slaying immediately. Owen reacted with a stunned gasp of disbelief. Still reeling from the sudden announcement, Owen protested, reminding Chris that they were merely first-year students and had just been informed that demon slaying was a third-year activity. Chris, however, simply scoffed, implying she had no intention of doing anything so conventional. Chris continued, explaining her rationale. Waiting until their third year would be too late, as the academy's students were becoming progressively less competent. Therefore, the decision was made to acclimate them to demons starting this very year. Owen, listening intently, could only utter a surprised sound before his expression shifted to one of utter dismay, realizing the gravity of the situation and declaring it completely absurd. He then wondered aloud if Ren Sensei's taunts during the recent victory celebration had influenced this drastic decision. Ren, however, quickly and emphatically denied any such connection, dismissing the idea with a confident smile. Natalie and Katerina also appeared taken aback by the revelation. The headmaster then stepped forward, offering an apology before admitting that he was the one who had proposed the idea, confident that the team who had competed just yesterday possessed the necessary strength to handle such a challenge. Owen looked on, utterly stunned by this confession. Owen clenched his fists in frustration, but the headmaster quickly interjected, praising him and asserting that he was far more capable than an average third-year student. The headmaster reiterated the truth of his assessment, confirming that he had personally proposed the accelerated training idea to Chris Sensei. Owen, caught off guard, could only stammer in response. Owen was still processing the headmaster's announcement when Chris, seemingly satisfied with the situation, declared it was time to announce the team formations for the upcoming demon slaying practice. As she continued, Chris revealed the team leaders. Team A would be led by Owen, Team B by Natalie, Team C by Berg, and Team D by Maurice Sensei. Owen, hearing his own name and Natalie's, immediately realized they were separated, a look of dismay on his face, while other students reacted with surprise. His dismay deepened when he learned he was grouped with Dominic, a hot-headed student who immediately expressed his displeasure at the assignment. Farron, a calm young woman, introduced herself and expressed her anticipation for working together, followed by Amelia, another composed student, who offered a polite greeting. Owen, attempting to assert his authority and prevent the team's morale from plummeting, loudly declared himself the leader. Dominic, however, remained unimpressed, while Farron and Amelia seemed indifferent to his declaration. Chris then explained the rules of the practice, stating that each team had a designated area for demon extermination. She also provided a magical tool, instructing them to use it to call a teacher if they found themselves in a dangerous situation, assuring them they would be fine as long as they didn't stray too far. With the instructions given, Maurice Sensei dismissed the students, who immediately scattered, rushing into the forest to begin their demon-slaying practice. Dominic, true to his impatient nature, wasted no time. He charged ahead, encountering a small demon, and with a furious yell, unleashed a powerful attack, obliterating the creature with a burst of magic. Owen, Farron, and Amelia arrived moments later, observing Dominic's aggressive approach. Owen remarked that Dominic hadn't changed, while Farron warned him not to get ahead of himself. Dominic, however, ignored their pleas, shouting that he didn't care and urging them to hurry, even as Amelia cautioned him about the danger. Owen, still trying to make sense of his new teammates, pondered Farron's abilities, recalling that she was known for using holy magic. He realized that with such a diverse and volatile group, they were likely to face significant challenges. Farron, overhearing Owen's thoughts, turned to him with a surprised expression, remarking that she had heard he used to be just like Dominic. Farron continued, explaining that Owen, at one point in his life, became the complete opposite of his former self, transforming into a good person. She added that she had heard many bad rumors about him since joining Zansar, describing his past behavior as treacherous, villainous, undignified, and impertinent. Owen chuckled, acknowledging it as a dark past. He questioned what she meant by his transformation, stating that he was simply disciplined by a good teacher and began reflecting on himself. Farron, observing him intently, simply acknowledged his explanation. As she spoke, Farron's expression softened, and she gently touched her own arm, revealing that she could relate to his experience. Her thoughts drifted to a time when her own body and soul were devastated, a life spent walking in darkness with no ray of hope. But then, a hand reached out, lifting her from the despair. Returning to the present, Farron explained that Owen's teacher had been a saint from the beginning, never losing her way. She admitted that she had always wanted to be like her and had desperately tried to change herself. Owen, surprised by her confession, found her words amazing. Owen then affirmed his deep respect for his teacher, acknowledging her as a great mage. He declared that this admiration was precisely why he had enrolled in the school, aspiring to become an amazing mage just like her. Farron listened, understanding his sentiment. She tilted her head, asking him to clarify what he meant by an amazing mage, wondering if it was because of her skill or her knowledge of magic. Owen stammered, unsure how to articulate his thoughts. Realizing his words might have been misinterpreted, Owen quickly apologized, assuring her he was not trying to make fun of his teacher. He then reflected internally, admitting that he had never truly given it much thought, and, When considering it rationally, he didn't actually know what kind of mage he wanted to be. He continued to ponder his future as a mage, acknowledging his desire to achieve Katarina's level of magical prowess, yet admitting that such a vision felt vague and undefined. Suddenly, a voice from off-panel interrupted his thoughts, urging him to stop. He looked up, realizing he truly needed to think more deeply about his aspirations. Farin, smiling warmly, offered her support, telling him she would be rooting for him. He responded with a hesitant, quiet affirmation. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Natalie desperately tried to restrain Dominic, who was attempting to rush forward. She reminded him that they were supposed to stay within a designated area, emphasizing that the exercise was meant for getting accustomed to demons, not for seeking out the strongest one. Dominic, however, insisted there might be a demon worth taking down ahead and demanded she release him. Still struggling to hold him back, Natalie exclaimed that Dominic was trying to go to the back, questioning what was truly happening. As Owen and Farin arrived, he shouted at Dominic to cease his reckless behavior, telling him to act like a leader if he truly wished to be one. Dominic clenched his jaw, clearly angered by the intervention. Dominic, his face contorted in a furious expression, yelled at Owen to be silent, declaring that Owen had no right to tell him what to do. He then charged off into the dense foliage, leaving the others behind. Natalie, looking distressed, murmured an uncertain sound. Owen, observing Dominic's reckless departure, resigned himself to following him. Farin then stated she would accompany them. As they followed, Natalie expressed a deep sense of unease, admitting she didn't know why but had a really bad feeling about the situation. Owen looked on, confused by her sudden apprehension. Moments later, a massive, muscular, boar-like demon with formidable tusks suddenly burst forth from the undergrowth, startling Owen and Farin. Owen, wide-eyed and terrified, exclaimed in shock at the monstrous creature's appearance, while Dominic was seen in the background, having apparently provoked the beast. Chapter 12 begins with Owen and Natalie encountering a monstrous, pig-faced demon in the forest, its sheer size dwarfing them. As they stared in disbelief, the creature's immense bulk and thick hide became apparent. It was an orc, a demon typically requiring several mages to subdue, but this one was far too large, suggesting a more powerful variant. The colossal beast let out a guttural growl, confirming their fears. It was a high orc. Unbeknownst to them, a cloaked figure watched from a distance, a faint, knowing smile playing on their lips. The hooded observer recalled the headmaster's words, who had prepared a magic stone infused with concentrated miasma specifically to summon a high orc. The headmaster had stated that Owen Pepper used witchcraft magic and wondered what he would do in this situation. The cloaked figure continued to ponder, realizing that an elite group of knights and mages would be needed to even stand a chance against such a creature. They mused that if Owen could use more types of witchcraft, they would be eager to see it. Suddenly, Natalie screamed, warning Owen not to shout so loudly lest he attract the orc's attention. The massive high orc then unleashed a devastating big fireball directly at them, forcing Owen to quickly dodge the explosive attack. He landed hard, feeling the immense pressure from the high orc's attack. The sheer power of the demon was overwhelming, leaving him momentarily stunned. Natalie, witnessing Owen's retreat, cried out in disbelief, questioning why he was running away instead of using a magical tool to call a teacher. Meanwhile, the hooded figure observed, deeming Owen's current target observation pathetic, though it made things more convenient for them. Despite his earlier retreat, Owen quickly retaliated, unleashing a big fireball of his own, directly impacting the high orc with a burst of magical energy. He then activated body-strengthening magic, his form becoming more defined, and urgently told Natalie to get out of there. Both Natalie and the hooded observer looked on, surprised by Owen's sudden surge of power and his command. Owen, still reeling from the previous encounter, decided to escape the high orc by leaping away, carrying Natalie with him. He knew he had to put distance between them and the formidable demon. As they ascended, he declared gravitational release, initiating a spell that would allow them to defy gravity. Natalie, surprised, realized they were floating, recognizing this as Owen's unique flight magic. Below them, the high orc let out a low, guttural growl. Natalie and another student, Farin, looked back in alarm at the pursuing high orc. Owen, however, was already struggling, realizing that the combined weight of 2 extra people was severely hindering his speed. The high orc, undeterred, prepared to hurl a massive club at them. Owen, unable to maneuver quickly enough to dodge, urgently called out to Farin and Amelia. Farin quickly responded that she understood and instructed Amelia to block the incoming attack. Owen, however, explained that he could not cast any other magic while maintaining their flight. The high orc continued its menacing growl as Farin unleashed a blade of wind, and Amelia followed with a spear of light. Penetrate, both spells striking the demon. The high orc roared in pain as the attacks connected, but Owen and the 3 students remained suspended in the air, looking down at the injured beast. Suddenly, Owen cried out in alarm, realizing he was losing control of his magic. His body refused to respond, and they began to plummet. Natalie, observing their rapid descent, quickly understood the cause. They were crashing because the high orc possessed a skill capable of paralyzing its enemies, and Owen had fallen victim to it. Still clutched by Owen, she felt the surge of magic as he initiated gravitational release, attempting to cushion their plummeting descent. The impact sent him crashing violently into the ground, his shoulder taking the full force of the blow, eliciting a sharp cry of "Gah!" as he winced in pain. He struggled to push himself up, groaning that he could not fight or even fly properly in this state, questioning if he had dislocated his shoulder. Natalie and Farin rushed to his side, calling his name in concern. Natalie quickly offered to heal him, but he sharply cut her off, insisting there was no time and ordering them to just run. The high orc loomed closer, and he declared that they would all be wiped out if they did nothing. He reiterated his command for them to go get the teachers, stating firmly that he would hold the creature back. Farin, understanding the gravity of the situation, agreed with his assessment, though Natalie still hesitated, her face etched with worry. As the high orc watched, they turned and fled into the dense forest, leaving him to face the monster alone. The creature called out, "Hey!" He glared back at the demon, sweat beading on his brow, preparing to unleash a counterattack. "Over here, you demon," he challenged. With a surge of magic, he unleashed a big fireball, a massive orb of flame that hurtled towards the high orc. The creature grunted, surprised by the attack's speed despite its size. The high orc, demonstrating its immense power, effortlessly shattered a large tree with a single blow. He realized that just one strike from the creature would mean game over, and that he would inevitably be cornered if he continued to fight defensively. He knew that even if he managed to stagger the high orc, his weaker magic would inflict no lasting damage. Only a powerful spell, perhaps Ifrit, stood a chance. Initially, he found no openings to cast such a potent spell, leading to a moment of disappointment. However, a sudden realization struck him. Magic was not merely about brute force, but about thinking beyond conventional limits. Unseen, a hooded figure observed his contemplation. Moments later, the high orc found itself bewildered and trapped amidst a chaotic pile of fallen logs. The hooded observer, witnessing this unexpected turn, realized Owen had not merely been fleeing, but executing a clever strategy. With the high orc momentarily incapacitated, Owen seized the opportunity, his expression grimly determined. He declared his intent to annihilate the enemy with hellfire, warning the creature to pay closer attention to its surroundings, for he would burn every log around it. He unleashed the Ifrit spell, a torrent of flames engulfing the high orc. He knew this might not be enough to kill it, but hoped it would at least keep the formidable foe trapped for a significant duration. Despite the inferno, the high orc's eyes, now devoid of surprise, narrowed with a chilling intensity, hinting at its immense resilience. To Owen's shock, the high orc burst forth from the flames, seemingly unharmed, and retaliated with a powerful, sweeping attack, forcing him to quickly evade the blow. The high orc stood, largely unfazed by the Ifrit spell, its form still imposing. Owen watched, a grim realization dawning upon him. Even his most potent attack had proven insufficient against this monstrous opponent. A wave of desperation washed over Owen as he internally pleaded for the teachers to arrive quickly, knowing he could not hold out much longer alone. Meanwhile, Natalie and Farin, believing they were almost back at the safe area, suddenly found their path blocked. To their horror, they realized they were completely surrounded by a horde of goblins. A goblin-like creature shrieked as it was violently struck by an unseen force, the impact tearing through its form as a voice declared the use of blades of wind. Meanwhile, deeper in the forest, Katerina expressed her concern, stating that they needed to find the teachers for Owen's sake, as the situation was becoming increasingly dire. Monet, looking distressed, agreed that it was tough. As they walked through the dense woods, Katerina pondered if the ability they had witnessed was that of a saint. She then suggested they should leave immediately, reasoning that with little miasma in the area, they could likely return safely. Monet, after a moment, agreed to the plan. However, Monet suddenly stopped, a faint glow emanating from her. She declared her intention to return to where Owen was, leaving Katerina stunned and questioning her decision. Katerina, her eyes wide with alarm, demanded to know what Monet was talking about, emphasizing the extreme danger of the area. Monet, however, remained resolute, believing Owen would have done the same for her. Without another word, Monet turned and began to run back into the forest. Katerina cried out, pleading with her to wait and to at least inform the teachers of the situation. Her desperate plea echoed through the trees as Monet continued to rush deeper into the woods, leaving Katerina to wonder what she was truly doing. As she ran, Monet's expression hardened with determination. She realized she should never have fled in the first place, affirming to herself that she was, in fact, a saintess. She continued her sprint, a fierce resolve burning within her. No matter the cost, she would use all her power to help others, understanding that this was the only right thing for a saintess to do, even if it meant putting her own life second. Monet pushed forward, her gaze fixed ahead. She muttered a name, right, Sophie? As if seeking confirmation, then reaffirmed her conviction. She had to do the right thing. She spotted him, still alive, locked in battle with the monstrous boar demon. Her gaze hardened as she internally resolved to use her holy magic to suppress the demon's miasma and knock it out, confident that the high orc remained unaware of her presence. Without hesitation, she launched her attack, a focused burst of energy she called Pierce Through, aiming directly at the formidable creature. To her dismay, the attack had no discernible effect. The demon merely grunted, completely unfazed by her efforts. The boar demon then revealed its own ability, activating a physical enhancement that visibly bulked its already massive form, making it even more imposing. With its enhanced strength, the demon struck Owen, sending him flying backward. Monet, reacting instantly, threw herself in front of him, shielding him from a follow-up blow. The impact left her sprawled on the ground, injured, as she cried out Owen's name, watching him struggle against the relentless assault. Despite her pain, she desperately tried to conjure a spear of light, but her magic faltered. She realized with a sinking heart that Owen was in dire peril. Owen, now sitting injured beneath a tree, looked at her with a pained expression, questioning why she would risk her life, warning her that she would get herself killed. He then focused, his eyes burning with resolve, preparing to unleash a powerful unloading strike. He knew the attack was difficult to land on a moving target and carried a significant recoil, but he had no other choice. He unleashed his piercing bullet attack, a focused burst of energy. The projectile struck the bored demon, eliciting a pained grunt as dark blood splattered from the impact. With the demon seemingly defeated, he slumped to the ground, exhausted but relieved, believing he had succeeded. Moments later, Farin rushed towards him, calling out his name with concern. She knelt beside him, immediately offering to heal his wounds. He, however, was more concerned for Amelia, whom he had left behind, hoping she had managed to call for the teachers. As Farin began to channel her holy magic, she quickly realized the severity of his injuries, noting that such a grave wound would require considerable time to heal. He looked at her, his face still streaked with dirt and blood, and questioned why she had returned for him, pointing out that she could have died in the process. She dismissed his concern, stating that his assessment was incorrect. He, however, insisted that she had indeed come dangerously close to death. Farin then explained her unwavering conviction. As a saintess, it was her duty to sacrifice herself for others, and she would not abandon him. She declared that if it came to it, she would give her life. He, however, urged her not to throw her life away so easily. He pondered her words, wondering if she was truly serious about such extreme philanthropy or if there was something else at play, concluding that her intensity made her seem dangerous. Meanwhile, from a hidden vantage point, a mysterious hooded figure observed the scene, finding the display of rare magic intriguing, though the girl's presence was a slight distraction. The figure mused about dealing with her later. The mysterious hooded figure, having observed enough, began to retreat, vanishing into the dense foliage. Meanwhile, Owen, still recovering from his powerful attack, watched as the massive boar demon lay motionless, seemingly defeated. However, the demon's body began to twitch, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light as it slowly pushed itself back to its feet. A low growl rumbled from its throat, indicating its resilience. The boar demon let out a guttural huff, its eyes now wide with renewed aggression. Owen stared in disbelief, realizing with a jolt that his attack had not been enough. The creature had gotten back up. He quickly pushed Farin behind him, urging her to stay back. His body was battered and exhausted, making him unfit to continue the fight against the reawakened beast. As the boar demon lunged forward with a terrifying roar, a new figure appeared, holding a shimmering crystal. With a calm declaration, she cast a spell, attempting to halt the demon's advance. The spell took immediate effect, encasing the charging boar demon in a massive block of ice. Owen, wide-eyed, recognized the newcomer and cried out her name, while she apologized for her delay. Meanwhile, the hooded figure continued its swift retreat, expressing frustration that their squad had failed to delay the newcomer. They muttered about the difficulty of dealing with 3 stars before disappearing completely, vowing to meet Owen again. The newly arrived Chris, her expression serious and focused, surveyed the scene, her gaze sharp and assessing. She then turned to Owen and Farin, asking if they were still alive. Owen, still dazed, stammered a hesitant reply, confirming his survival. Owen, clutching his chest, let out a sigh of relief, realizing he was alive and wondering if the immediate danger had passed. He was suddenly embraced by Farin, who cried out in relief that he was safe. Still disoriented, he could only manage a confused query about what had just transpired. She quickly apologized to him for her rough embrace, then turned to address someone else, likely Chris, urging them not to be too harsh on Owen. Farin explained that his injury had been life-threatening, and she had barely managed to treat it. As they spoke, other students, including Chris, Katarina, Monet, Thor, Kaizef, Student A, Berg, Dominic, and Amelia, gathered nearby, all expressing relief that everyone was safe. Owen, however, downplayed his role, denying that he had single-handedly defeated a high orc. He continued, admitting that he had almost been killed by the creature. Despite his near-fatal encounter, he acknowledged that it was thanks to his actions that no one else had perished. Another student, Berg, stepped forward to commend Owen, telling him he should be proud. Owen, still processing the events, looked bewildered, questioning if that was truly how such situations were perceived. Dominic, however, was far from impressed. He angrily confronted Owen, calling him a fool and a coward for recklessly challenging an enemy without understanding his own capabilities, nearly dying in the process. Owen flinched, looking away from the harsh criticism. He pressed on, asserting that Owen was just as much a failure if he hadn't realized the true power of his opponent. Owen, his own anger rising, retorted by asking if Dominic himself had not been the first to flee. His accusation left Dominic momentarily stunned, his face contorted in shock. The surrounding students looked on with wide eyes, while Farin simply narrowed hers in annoyance. Dominic, still reeling from Owen's unexpected counter, internally justified his actions, convincing himself that he had made the correct decision by retreating. He then looked around, bewildered by the sudden attention of his peers. Just then, Mori-sensei approached Dominic, placing a hand on his shoulder. The teacher calmly affirmed Dominic's perspective, stating that he was quite right. Mori-sensei, continuing his assessment, declared that weaklings are better off running away. Owen, listening intently, reacted with a pained expression, believing the teacher's words were directed at him and confirmed his own perceived inadequacy. However, Mori-sensei quickly clarified, stating that Owen was special and strong enough to let everyone escape as he bravely fought. This unexpected praise only fueled Owen's internal turmoil, causing him to clench his fists in frustration. Mori-sensei then turned his attention to Dominic, pointedly asking if Owen, despite his perceived weakness, had not done his best. Dominic, after a moment, conceded that Mori-sensei was not wrong, though he turned away as he spoke. Farin, observing the exchange, expressed her concern over the harshness of Mori-sensei's words, while Owen remained downcast, acknowledging the truth in the assessment. Owen's thoughts drifted, consumed by regret. He reflected that if he had been smarter, if he had thought more carefully about the situation, they might have avoided the peril. He admitted to himself that he had made the wrong choice, and that a single misstep could have led to everyone's demise. A memory flashed, depicting a powerful flame bullet tearing through the dense forest, a testament to the destructive force unleashed during the perilous encounter. The vivid recollection brought Owen to a breaking point, as he screamed in anguish, blaming himself entirely for the events. Later, leaning against a tree, he continued to mutter in self-reproach, the weight of his perceived failures pressing down on him. Despite his despair, a fierce resolve ignited within Owen. With a determined, almost desperate expression, he declared his unwavering desire to become stronger. Chapter 14 opens with an urgent investigation underway in the forest near the royal capital, prompted by the sudden appearance of a high orc. 3 cloaked figures, 2 men and a woman, traversed the dense woods, their expressions serious. The cloaked woman reported that while traces of the monster were found, there were no signs of other high orcs or even their tracks. The cloaked man, surprised by this, mused that such a powerful monster would not appear without warning. He then presented a small bag, explaining it was discovered at the scene. She continued, her gaze sharp, explaining that even a minuscule fragment of crushed magic stone, if attached to something, could artificially strengthen a monster or even summon one. This led her to the firm conclusion that someone was secretly orchestrating these events. The situation was deemed critical, with a voice declaring that they must thoroughly investigate before the trail grew cold. Another voice affirmed the command with a resolute yes. The narrative then shifted, introducing the summer uniforms of Sanzor Academy, designed with nobility in mind and crafted from high-quality, breathable materials. The badges on the uniforms indicated the department and year of the students. In a different setting, a training ground for first-year students, a young man faced a towering, fiery Ifrit. A commanding voice urged him to lift the magic-made rock before him. As the Ifrit attacked, its massive fist shattered the rock into countless fragments. The young man reacted with a frustrated cry, realizing the creature was not trying to harm him, but rather to destroy the object. Lying on the ground, the young man reflected on his predicament. He desired to overcome his weaknesses, but brute force alone would not suffice. He recalled his past battle with the Orc King, realizing he was merely throwing flames at a humanoid form. He pondered if he could somehow make the humanoid form useful. The Ifrit, a creature whose summoning magic was based on a previous game, was inherently easy to command for simple attacks. Yet, despite this, the young man questioned why he could not freely manipulate it for more intricate actions like grabbing or defending. He was abruptly confronted by a woman with long, reddish-brown hair, who casually greeted him as Owen. She immediately accused him of using the training grounds without permission, catching him off guard. She then sternly reminded him that using the training grounds required an application and permission, and questioned the appropriateness of his late-night outings as a student. He stammered, struggling to find a response. Despite his protests that she was being unfair, she admitted with a knowing smirk that she had been aware of his unauthorized use all along. She clarified that while an application was indeed necessary, she had been overseeing him. She offered to continue overlooking his actions in the future, prompting him to express his gratitude. However, her tone abruptly shifted as she declared him her personal errand boy and immediately ordered him to investigate the third-year training grounds. He reacted with shock and disbelief at the sudden command. He questioned why the third-year grounds specifically, and why for such an extended period. She explained that there had been numerous anomalies within the Academy's facilities recently. The third-year training grounds, in particular, were frequently experiencing flooding despite the absence of rain, a peculiar occurrence that suggested someone like him might be involved. She instructed him to report anything he found, implying she would handle any necessary disciplinary action. With a dismissive wave, she sent him on his way, stating she was busy. He reluctantly agreed and departed. Arriving at the designated location, he cautiously peered around a corner, wondering if this was indeed the third-year training grounds. His eyes widened in surprise as a small, white, cat-like creature, seemingly composed of a fluid or light-like substance, suddenly leaped into view, surrounded by shimmering droplets. A cheerful girl with short, light-colored hair cradled the mysterious cat-like creature, which shimmered as if made of water. She smiled brightly, seemingly delighted by its presence. He watched, wide-eyed, as the creature, indeed appearing to be formed from water, leaped gracefully. The girl, now standing beside him, also looked on with a surprised expression as droplets of water splashed around them. Flustered, he tried to explain his presence, stating that a teacher had instructed him to observe the situation. The girl, however, interrupted him, addressing him directly as Owen Pepper. He apologized, admitting he couldn't recall if they had met before. She then mentioned his alias, his Ho, and implied he was quite famous, suggesting he must be the one with 2 names. He became visibly embarrassed as she continued to praise him, specifically for his impressive feat of defeating Kaizaf in the martial arts tournament. She then introduced herself as Tanya, a third-year student. He, in turn, questioned her about using the training grounds, pointing out that official permission was typically required, especially for nighttime use. She quickly apologized, her face flushing with embarrassment, as he pressed further, asking if she, a senior student, also trained in this restricted area. She explained her predicament, admitting her grades were poor and she needed to train independently. However, the training grounds were prioritized for noble students during the day, leaving her with only the late hours to practice. He then proposed a solution, suggesting they train together. He assured her that if she was agreeable, he wouldn't mind, leaving her looking utterly surprised by the unexpected offer. He further clarified, explaining that he had received special permission from his homeroom teacher for various reasons, and that his teacher had also mentioned any potential penalties would be waived if he trained. He believed that training together would likely be fine. He thanked Tanya for her agreement, then inquired if she was performing magic power circulation as a warm-up. She looked at him, a hint of surprise in her expression. Moments later, Tanya lay sprawled on the ground, panting heavily, small bubbles of exhaustion rising around her as she struggled with the demanding exercise. She remained on the ground, sweat beading on her face, internally lamenting the difficulty of magic power circulation. She wondered if Owen truly performed such strenuous training every single day. Owen, observing her struggle, offered an encouraging smile, telling her that their levels were simply different, and he too had felt the same way when he first started. He assured her that she was indeed growing. As he spoke, he effortlessly ascended into the air, demonstrating the magic of flight. Tanya, wide-eyed, stared up at him, asking how he had managed to acquire such an incredible spell. He explained that he had simply recalled knowledge from a previous life. Tanya's eyes widened further, and she clapped her hands together, exclaiming that it was an astonishing talent. She then looked down, a sigh escaping her lips, confessing that she could barely handle even basic magic and was barely scraping by in her studies. Owen, however, remained undeterred, his eyes sparkling with excitement. He insisted that she had used amazing magic earlier and eagerly requested to see it properly. Tanya, blushing slightly, tried to dismiss it, claiming it wasn't anything worth showing. With a hesitant expression, she finally relented, agreeing to show him just a little bit of her cool side. She then called out, "Omaniko, appear before me." A ripple spread across the water, and from its depths, a small, translucent, cat-like creature began to emerge. Tanya, now beaming with a mix of pride and slight embarrassment, presented the glowing, water-based feline spirit, declaring it to be spirit magic, her sole specialty. The creature stretched gracefully, letting out a soft meow. Her unique display of spirit magic left him utterly stunned, his eyes wide with disbelief and wonder. As he processed the revelation, she explained that spirit magic involved creating self-moving entities with their own will, and that the spirits inhabiting magic were the origin of its name. She then added that he, too, was using it. He questioned her, asking if the Ifrit he had summoned, which seemed to possess its own will and movement, was also a form of spirit magic. He admitted this was the first time he had heard of such a thing. She confirmed his suspicion, stating that the Ifrit was indeed spirit magic. However, he lamented that he could not control it freely like she could, his frustration evident as he hunched over. A fierce determination ignited within him as he considered the possibility of incorporating the Ifrit's free movement into his own abilities. With renewed resolve, he looked up at her, earnestly pleading for her to teach him the secrets of spirit magic. His unexpected request left her utterly astonished, her eyes wide with surprise. She protested, flustered, questioning why a noble from Class A like him would ask her to teach him, insisting that he was the amazing magic user. He countered, explaining that he wanted to become much stronger and believed that if they trained together, learning from each other, their progress would be swift. She remained silent, still processing his words, a thoughtful and slightly overwhelmed expression on her face. She finally agreed to teach him, and Owen, beaming with excitement, readily accepted. Thus began their secret special training, a journey into the mysteries of his unique abilities. Yet, as he began, a thought nagged at him. Tanya was a water magic user, so why was the training ground already scorched? He attempted to conjure a giant flame bullet, straining with effort, sweat beading on his brow as he struggled to manifest the fiery spell. His frustration mounted. This was not the magic of his Ifrit. Behind him, the monstrous form of his uncontrolled Ifrit loomed, a stark reminder of his true, untamed power. Suddenly, a voice cut through his thoughts, sharply telling him that mimicking Owen's magic was impossible for him. The voice then challenged, asking who among them wished to be burned alive. A new figure, a young man with a confident smile, appeared, remarking casually on the distinct smell of blood in the air. He introduced himself as Leo, explaining that he had been observing for 3 years and wished to assist his cute junior. Owen, wary, demanded to know his purpose. Owen vehemently rejected the offer, insisting he could train alone. Leo, however, stepped on his outstretched hand, asserting that it would be impossible for him to catch up to Owen's level by himself. Leo continued, explaining that without the martial arts tournament, and with everyone's expectations resting solely on Owen, the disparity between them would only continue to widen. Owen listened, his expression a mix of distress and frustration. Leo then offered his assistance, suggesting that if Owen merely wished to mimic strength, he should not train in solitude. He questioned if Owen was truly content with his current path, implying a need for a different approach to truly level up. He continued his offer, stating that he could make Dominic stronger. He then questioned if Dominic was interested in the power of a witch. Dominic, his eyes wide with disbelief and his mouth agape, could only stammer out the word witch. He then seemed to question Dominic Cohen, as if confirming the name or the person being addressed. The cloaked figure spoke of the witch, one of the calamities, a former mage of the 3 stars. She was a great criminal, condemned by the king for her forbidden research into immortality. Dominic listened, his eyes wide with apprehension. He recoiled, declaring his absolute refusal to become like Owen, who could use magic. The cloaked figure simply smiled, observing his strong reaction. The cloaked figure then told Dominic that the choice of what he would seek was his own, but that he would surely desire power. Meanwhile, Chris-sensei, having officially granted permission, smiled knowingly. Back in training, the schoolgirl called out "Sea Cat" as she summoned her familiar, while Dominic shouted "Ifrit" as his own fiery spirit manifested. Moments later, the Sea Cat, agile and swift, had once again captured the flag, leaving Dominic frustrated and defeated. The schoolgirl, looking a little sheepish, admitted she had won again, noting that he wasn't listening to her at all. He pondered Tanya's freedom, realizing he couldn't move with such agility. The schoolgirl agreed, stating that while he was certainly strong, he lacked something, perhaps a certain nimbleness. She continued, suggesting that he lacked substance, or perhaps a deeper understanding. The Sea Cat then chimed in, asking if she meant the contents of spirit magic, or perhaps returning to the original creature. The schoolgirl explained that she had always kept a cat at home, so she understood cat movements well and could easily imagine them. She advised Dominic to observe his target carefully, like Owen did, and then his movements would become natural. She then asked about Ifrit, a name he had never heard before. He, startled, wondered if it was a game from his past life, a concept he found impossible to articulate. She continued, pondering if monsters truly existed in this world. He, however, simply stated that he had given the name Ifrit appropriately, without much thought. His mind raced, realizing he had never actually researched the monsters of this world. The idea of observing them, as she had suggested, now seemed utterly impossible and unreasonable. She explained that spirits were easier to create if based on living things, but her sea cat was merely a model, not a true creature. She added that it was possible to compensate for a lack of direct observation with other things, implying experience and knowledge. He finally understood. With a shift in topic, she then asked if he was free the following day. He hesitated, admitting he had no particular plans. Upon hearing his availability, she beamed, her face lighting up with a cheerful smile as she suggested they go out to play. The following day, the two found themselves amidst a bustling commercial district, a place she had only visited a few times before. He remarked on the sheer number of people, while she questioned if it was truly acceptable for them to be there today, making him wonder if this outing was a date. He then inquired if she always visited with Tanya-san. She looked away, her expression softening as she admitted she had no friends. His eyes widened in surprise at her confession. She explained that as a commoner, her grades had been falling, and the noble children refused to associate with her. Yet, her demeanor brightened as she declared it was fine, for she had been worried about Owen. He watched her, a profound realization dawning upon him about her true character, thinking how she was such a good person despite her struggles. Dominic found himself in a tense situation as a male student. Owen loudly declared himself Tanya-san's friend, asserting his connection to her. The sudden declaration caused a stir among the surrounding students, who exchanged surprised whispers. Meanwhile, the schoolgirl, taken aback by Owen's bold statement, blushed deeply and quietly wondered about his intentions. He then turned to the schoolgirl, explaining that while he once had no friends, Tanya-san was now teaching him a great deal. With a slight bow, he asked for her continued guidance for the day, to which she softly replied with gratitude. The day continued as they ventured into a bustling city district, marked by grand architecture and a towering clock. As they explored, the schoolgirl paused to admire a potted flower, while he seemed to be examining something on the ground nearby. Her spirits lifted, she beamed a wide smile, clutching a small, decorative trinket she had acquired. Later, they sat together, enjoying a meal of hot dogs, which she declared to be absolutely delicious. After their extensive travels, she looked at him, wondering aloud if he had managed to find any useful hints. She suddenly gasps, realizing she had become so engrossed in their time together that she had completely forgotten something important. She then clarifies her previous statement, dismissing it as a joke, and adds that she was glad if their outing had been for his sake. Dominic looks surprised, asking her what she truly meant. She then reveals that she was actually stuck and needed to go somewhere specific. She continues, explaining that her family runs a small, commoner shop, and despite their humble status, her parents know she can use spirit magic. The scene shifts to an imposing view of the academy, a grand institution that her parents had managed to enroll her in, likely through great effort. She sighs, revealing that the tuition fees are incredibly difficult to manage. While she has a scholarship, her grades aren't quite good enough to fully cover the costs. She then explains that if she performs well on the next exam, she can receive a superior scholarship. She looks at Dominic, asking if he will help her study. He agrees, stating that there is one more place they need to visit today, the central clock tower. She looks up at the towering structure, her expression thoughtful. She explains that people say if you make a wish at the very top, it will come true. Dominic looks skeptical, questioning if such a thing is truly possible. With a determined expression, she grabs his hand and pulls him along, declaring that they should go to the clock tower immediately. The grand clock tower, a landmark of the city, stood tall against the sky, its intricate architecture a testament to ages past. It was towards this legendary structure that they had been heading. As she continued to rush him through the bustling streets, the schoolgirl urged Dominic to hurry, explaining that the tower would close by evening. Suddenly, a commotion erupted as a thief snatched a wallet from an unsuspecting person, prompting her to cry out in alarm. Her eyes narrowed with fierce determination as she processed the theft, while Dominic looked on in wide-eyed surprise. A small, white cat-like creature, glowing faintly, materialized nearby, ready to act. The thief, clutching the stolen wallet, turned to flee, only to be met with a startling sight that made him exclaim in shock. He cursed under his breath, desperately trying to escape into a narrow alleyway. But the glowing cat creature was relentless, hot on his heels. Deep within the alley, a burly man with a prominent goatee, surrounded by his intimidating group, acknowledged the thief's presence. He remarked that the alley was known for its intricate layout and poor security, a place where one should not linger. Meanwhile, the schoolgirl, seeing Dominic about to follow, urgently instructed him to wait for her, calling out his name with a worried expression. Ignoring her plea, he broke into a sprint, his determination overriding caution as he pursued the thief. He scanned the area, realizing he could find the thief even without a direct line of sight if he looked from above. As he wondered where the thief had gone, he suddenly noticed the schoolgirl, now soaring through the air above the alley, while the thugs below looked up in astonishment. The thief, now disoriented and with his head wet, stumbled forward, complaining that the strange magic of the cat creature had struck him, forcing him into this predicament. He screamed in terror as the schoolgirl's voice cut through the alley, warning him that he needed to be more careful. The thief, still clutching his ill-gotten gains, was clearly in a state of panic. Moments later, the commotion had drawn a small crowd. The schoolgirl stood among the onlookers, observing the captured thief who was now surrounded by several figures, his escape definitively thwarted. As the situation settled, Owen approached Tanya, a triumphant smile on his face. He held up the recovered bag of stolen goods, announcing that the matter was concluded. He then explained to Tanya that the culprit had been apprehended by the self-defense magic users. She listened intently, acknowledging his words with a nod as the iconic clock tower loomed in the distance. Owen continued, giving a thumbs up and crediting the sea cat for quickly locating the thief. Tanya simply responded with a soft "I see," while Dominic, standing nearby, looked on with a thoughtful expression. Tanya then turned her gaze, a gentle smile gracing her lips, as if contemplating a new resolve. She confessed to Dominic that she had actually been considering dropping out of the academy, a revelation that clearly shocked him. However, she quickly added that she had been wavering, but the recent incident had given her a newfound confidence, affirming that her magic could indeed be useful. With a determined expression, Tanya declared that she now believed practicing magic was truly enjoyable and that she would work hard for the next exam. As they walked away, Tanya mentioned that she had wanted to go to the clock tower, but now it was too late. Dominic walked beside her, his gaze cast downwards, deep in thought. He declared with a determined fist that he would take her there. Surprised, she pointed towards the distant clock tower, confirming her understanding of his offer. Owen and the schoolgirl stood before a door marked close, its entrance seemingly sealed. She wondered aloud how they were meant to proceed, given the obvious obstruction. Without warning, Owen swiftly grabbed her, eliciting a surprised yelp. He looked at her with a confident smirk, challenging her to consider who she truly believed him to be. Moments later, he soared into the sky, carrying her effortlessly on his back. He declared himself Owen of the Soaring Wings, and explained that he was releasing gravity, revealing his mastery of flight magic. The schoolgirl, astonished, could only exclaim her disbelief at the sensation. As they glided high above the city, the schoolgirl gazed down at the sprawling landscape, utterly captivated by the breathtaking view. She praised Owen, marveling at his incredible ability to fly. Their aerial journey continued, and she confirmed their success, feeling certain that this experience qualified them. Soon after, now safely inside a building, she turned to Owen with a serious expression, asking him for a favor. They shared a moment of quiet contentment, looking out at the world below. She vowed that she would never forget the magnificent scenery they had witnessed together. Several days later, Chris-sensei sat contentedly, happily munching on a cookie. She exclaimed her satisfaction, declaring that this was exactly what she wanted, and offered her thanks to Owen. She then explained that the cookies had been incredibly difficult to acquire, lamenting a misunderstanding with Natalie. With a playful smirk, she added that thanks to her efforts, both Tanya and Owen were now receiving special training. Owen and the schoolgirl, however, appeared utterly exasperated by her antics. Still enjoying her cookies, Chris-sensei continued to speak, reminding Owen about his test preparations and the upcoming submission deadline. He simply acknowledged her words, a hint of resignation in his expression. Elsewhere, several glowing, feline-like creatures frolicked, one of them exclaiming, "Sea cat." They now appeared in greater numbers, as Tanya excitedly informed Owen that she could summon 2 of them at once, all thanks to his help. She also revealed that new magic for the upcoming test had been developed. As she spoke, Owen's expression shifted to one of worry. Tanya declared her determination to work hard for Chris-sensei, but Owen was preoccupied, recalling Chris-sensei's stern warning about the application deadline, which was today. Despite his internal worry, he outwardly dismissed the notion, flashing a wide smile as he asked Tanya if she could possibly forget such a crucial detail. Tanya, however, looked away, a blush of embarrassment creeping onto her face. The realization struck them both simultaneously. Their eyes widened in horror, and their faces contorted into expressions of pure panic as they both cried out, having completely forgotten the deadline. Without a moment's hesitation, Owen seized Tanya's arm, urging her to hurry, declaring there was no time to waste. Tanya quickly agreed, and they rushed off, unaware that Leo watched them from behind a wall, a subtle smirk playing on his lips. Days later, the urgency of the deadline was behind them, and Owen was back in magic control class. He proudly demonstrated his ability to project a fireball approximately 3 meters, a feat that impressed Leo. Leo, observing the display, inquired if Owen had some special trick. Owen, with a smug expression, merely hinted at a secret. As Owen finished his demonstration, Leo approached him and Dominic, his tone probing. He directly asked Dominic if he had been secretly training with commoners at night. Dominic's eyes widened in shock, demanding to know how Leo had discovered his activities. He continued, a cruel smile spreading across his face, as he spoke of the commoner, implying that such actions would lead to their expulsion from the academy. Owen, hearing the veiled threat, immediately questioned if Leo spoke of Tanya, his concern evident. Dominic, still confused by Leo's accusations, asked what he was even talking about. Leo merely waved off their inquiries, his smirk unwavering. Internally, he mused that he had seen that girl just the other day, hinting at his knowledge of Tanya's involvement. He wore a cruel smirk as he mused that commoners often misunderstood their place, requiring a firm lesson to be taught kindly. Meanwhile, Tanya rushed through the halls, clutching an application, worried she might miss the deadline. Suddenly, a figure blocked her path, asking who she was. He then informed her that submitting such a document would be utterly pointless. His smirk widened as he questioned if she even knew about tuition fees, implying she was ignorant and that the entire examination was rigged from the very beginning. He declared with a furious expression that useless commoners were not needed in this system. Tanya's eyes widened in disbelief at his harsh words. He continued, asserting that if commoners were not kept in their place, the academy would be overrun, and that magic itself was inherently the domain of the nobility. Tanya flinched back, startled by his vehemence. Leaning in close, he spat that commoners with mediocre magic were utterly worthless, incapable of serving nobles or being used for their wealth. With a sudden, forceful shove, he pushed Tanya away. He then let out a mocking laugh, pointing towards a nearby door, claiming he had taught her a valuable lesson for daring to stray from her station. But then, his eyes snapped wide open, a look of profound shock replacing his cruel amusement. He continued to rage, his face contorted in fury, as Owen desperately tried to restrain him, urging him to calm down. Tanya, however, stood her ground, refuting his claims and asserting her own commoner status. His anger only intensified, his voice rising as he declared that he was doing them a favor by crushing their futile hopes, demanding gratitude for his supposed kindness. He then turned his venomous words on Tanya, accusing her of lacking the talent to justify her arrogance, reminding her of her fear when facing a high orc. Suddenly, his furious expression shattered, replaced by a look of profound shock and disbelief as a new realization dawned upon him. A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers as Chris-sensei swiftly intervened, her voice firm as she commanded both Leo and Owen to cease their altercation and calm themselves. She then turned her gaze to Leo, questioning his earlier detailed and loud pronouncements. Leo, however, was already turning to flee, cursing Owen under his breath. As he ran, a torrent of frustrated thoughts consumed him. He cursed the situation, the unfairness, and even Chris-sensei, wondering if her words implied she also considered him weak. His desperate flight led him away from the scene, past the imposing structure of the elementary department classroom building. Meanwhile, Owen frantically searched for Tanya, checking the classrooms, but she was nowhere to be found. He wondered where she could have gone. Then, he spotted her. Tanya stood nearby, her expression one of mild surprise as Owen called out her name. Owen approached her, his voice filled with concern as he asked what she meant by quitting. Tanya, seated on the ground, suggested that perhaps Chris-sensei could help with the petition, to which Owen responded with a worried inquiry about her decision. She explained that her family's finances were indeed difficult, and interacting with the noble children had been a struggle for her. Despite her decision to leave the academy, she affirmed that she had enjoyed her training with Owen and would not abandon magic entirely. As they walked away, Owen lamented that he had wanted to keep her decision a secret, hoping to avoid such an emotional outcome. He then expressed his deep frustration, feeling utterly powerless to resolve the issues of noble discrimination or her financial plight. Tanya looked at him, surprised by the intensity of his words. With a sudden burst of determination, Owen declared that they should take a graduation exam. Tanya, holding a small suitcase, questioned if he truly meant a graduation exam, not a withdrawal. Owen, unwavering, firmly stated that he would not allow her to withdraw. She smiled, finding his stubborn resolve very much like him, and he insisted that she demonstrate the results of her efforts thus far. Tanya raised her hand, calling upon the water, the very source of life, to lend its power and manifest the sea cats. Below, two cat-like water spirits began to coalesce around her and Owen. Owen watched in wide-eyed astonishment as the water spirits fully formed, taking on the distinct shapes of the feline creatures. Tanya, beaming with pride, pointed to the sky where a shimmering rainbow now arched, explaining that this was her new magic. She then wondered aloud if it was acceptable to possess magic that was beautiful, but seemingly without practical use. She pondered, her thoughts drifting to a single word, I. Moments later, she turned to Dominic, asking if he had managed to graduate properly. He beamed, confirming that he had passed without any issues or complaints. The academy building stood under a cloudy sky, a symbol of countless aspirations. A voice congratulated someone on their graduation, while another thought echoed, a promise made long ago. Someday, I will definitely. I thought that once I became a great magic user, I would go to meet her, but as Dominic stood, lost in thought, another student approached him, remarking calmly that he had expected him to arrive. Suddenly, Owen appeared, his face etched with distress, and confronted Dominic directly. He questioned him, asking if he had truly desired power. Winter had settled upon the academy, and Chris-sensei addressed the students, reminding them of the impending term-end exams. She emphasized that their performance would significantly impact their advancement to higher grades, urging them not to neglect their studies. She then turned her attention to Dominic, asking if he felt prepared for the upcoming tests. Tanya, standing nearby, confidently interjected that she anticipated no issues with either the written or practical portions, then playfully challenged him to a contest. As the first 2 days of written exams commenced, Dominic sat at his desk, diligently writing. He inwardly boasted that he had paid close attention in class, ensuring an easy victory in the tests designed to gauge their understanding of theoretical magic. On the third day, the practical examination began. Chris-sensei stood before the assembled students, instructing them to demonstrate their proficiency with long-range magic, specifically evaluating their mana control. The targets for this practical test were arrayed before them, designed to react to magical energy. Scores would be awarded based on both the accuracy and raw power of their spells. Dominic stepped forward, confident in his extensive practice with long-range techniques. With a focused expression, he unleashed a devastating Fire Zone spell. The powerful magic erupted, completely obliterating not just his designated targets, but several others nearby. The surrounding students gasped in awe, while he beamed with satisfaction at his overwhelming success. Chris-sensei, however, observed the destruction with a furrowed brow, her expression one of annoyance. She muttered that he had destroyed other targets, which would unfortunately lead to a deduction in his score. He reacted with a comical expression of shock and dismay, realizing his powerful, yet indiscriminate, attack had backfired on his grade. Meanwhile, Owen, who had been watching Dominic's performance, stepped forward with a confident smirk. He then declared his intent to cast his own formidable Black Flame Bullet spell, seemingly ready to outdo Dominic. Owen, having just declared his challenge, swiftly conjured an earth wall to block Dominic's incoming attack. Dominic, caught off guard, stared in disbelief, realizing Owen was deliberately targeting him again. Nearby, Schoolgirl_1 and Tanya_senpai watched with growing concern. His powerful Black Flame Bullet then struck the earth wall, melting it instantly and leaving Dominic utterly stunned by the sheer destructive force. He immediately followed up by conjuring an ice shield, manifesting a formidable barrier of jagged ice to defend against any potential counterattack from Dominic. Meanwhile, Chris-sensei, observing the chaotic display, expressed her exasperation at Owen's antics. He, however, merely grinned, offering a flippant apology about his hand slipping. Schoolgirl_1 and Tanya_senpai continued to look on with worried expressions. He then approached Dominic, playfully patting his head and asking if he had been hurt, a mischievous glint in his eye. Chris-sensei then addressed him, stating that while his attitude was peculiar, if he insisted it was a mere accident, she would have no choice but to disqualify him from the practical exam. He readily agreed, seemingly unconcerned by the consequence. With the exam officially concluded and students dismissed, he grabbed Dominic by the collar, demanding to know what he had been doing earlier. Dominic seemed confused by the sudden confrontation. He leaned in close, a smirk playing on his lips, and apologized for breaking Dominic's weak magic, his tone dripping with playful condescension. As he walked away, Dominic watched him, reflecting that Owen always picked fights, but this time felt profoundly different. He noticed something peculiar about Owen's hand as he departed. He stared intently, a sense of unease settling over him as he pondered Owen's strange demeanor and the true, unsettling power of his Black Flame Bullet. He was approached by Farin, who politely asked if she could speak with him. When he inquired about the nature of the discussion, she suggested they move to a more private location, as their current spot was unsuitable. After finding a secluded area, she revealed that the conversation was specifically about him, Dominic. She then expressed her concern, asking if he didn't feel that something was amiss with a certain individual. He pressed for specifics, and she explained that recently, regardless of grade level, there had been various interactions, but then she trailed off, seemingly hesitant to continue. With a look of shock on his face, she revealed that ever since those interactions began, she had been sensing a strange miasma emanating from him, Dominic. He questioned what miasma was, recalling that it was something demons emitted. She confirmed his understanding, stating that it was indeed dangerous and that it was not something a human should possess. The miasma was known to powerfully transform a demon's physical body. However, if a demon could not withstand the rapid changes, it would inevitably perish. Alarmed, he tried to interject, but she continued, explaining that humans could not endure such a thing, and while she lacked complete confidence in her assessment, she also implied that his position or feelings were not her primary concern. She then apologized, admitting that her actions were selfish, driven by her desire to avoid regret. He, looking troubled, simply asked if it was truly fine as long as she was confident in her decision. Later, alone, he reflected on the conversation. He realized he was also concerned about the situation and resolved that he needed to investigate or stop whatever was happening before it escalated further. He found himself on a bustling street, the sounds of the city echoing around him. Beside him, Farin inquired about their destination, her gaze fixed on the path ahead. She then pointed towards a narrow alleyway, questioning if there were any shops within its confines. He observed the path with a wary, suspicious expression. The pursuit continued through the winding streets, the architecture of the buildings looming overhead as they pressed forward. They rounded a corner, expecting to find their quarry, but the alley ahead appeared empty. He expressed surprise at the sudden disappearance. The path abruptly ended in a dead end, a brick wall blocking their way. He questioned where the person they were following could have gone, while Farin, her expression grim, sensed a lingering presence. He pondered the possibility of a hidden door, extending a hand towards the wall. He then turned to Farin, asking if she believed their target could be concealed within the seemingly solid barrier. She considered the notion, acknowledging its potential. He then attempted a more direct approach, shouting for the wall to open, only to realize that a simple magic word would not suffice. Farin, observing his efforts, questioned what he was doing. Undaunted, he declared his intention to use wind magic, channeling it towards the wall. He explained that this was an original form of magic designed to transmit sound through the wind, much like radio waves, assuring Farin that it should pass through the wall without issue. Farin, however, heard Dominic's voice, realizing he was speaking to someone. She sensed an escalating danger, urging him to stop and warning him that further amplification of his power was perilous. He, now surrounded by swirling magical energy, questioned Farin about the medicine she mentioned, finding it suspicious to discuss such things in a back alley. Farin, her face etched with panic, desperately called out to Owen. His concentration, which had been focused on his wind magic, suddenly broke. He looked startled, asking what was happening, while Farin, standing close by, watched him with concern. His attention, and Farin's, was then drawn to the alley entrance, where several figures emerged. They were students, surrounding them, their presence unexpected and unsettling. One of the students, with long, disheveled hair and a wild look in his eyes, stepped forward, pointing an accusing finger. He demanded to know what Dominic and Farin were doing there, his voice laced with aggression. The student's face contorted further, his eyes wide and bloodshot, a trickle of saliva escaping his lips. He continued his rant, accusing them of also being after that medicine, his words revealing a disturbing obsession. Dominic stared back, bewildered by the student's deranged state, while Farin, her expression grim, sensed a profound illness emanating from the agitated figure. She wondered what was wrong with him. He continued to babble, his voice rising in intensity, declaring that the medicine was his, and that he would not let anyone take it. His eyes seemed to bulge, reflecting his desperate fervor. With the situation rapidly deteriorating, Dominic grabbed Farin's hand. He urged her to run, and together they turned to flee the alley, leaving the deranged students behind.